The cursor blinked. Blank page. Blink, blink, blink. A tiny rhythmic heartbeat on a field of white. It was mocking me. Every blink a tiny, "You suck." The deadline from the publisher felt less like a date on a calendar and more like a physical weight on my chest. I couldn't breathe right. My apartment was a dump. Stacks of books leaned at impossible angles. A half-eaten pizza sat on the coffee table, a monument to my creative failure. I glanced at the pile of final notice bills on the counter. Red ink everywhere. It looked like the mail had been in a knife fight. I pushed away from the laptop. The chair squeaked in protest. I picked up my phone, the screen a welcome, mindless glow. A few taps and I was scrolling. Instagram. Facebook. A feed of other people's success. Mark Jennings, who I went to college with, just sold his second novel to a major film studio. His picture showed him grinning, holding a glass of champagne, his wife looking at him like he'd hung the moon. I felt a sour taste in my mouth. My finger kept swiping. Another writer, a girl I'd met at a workshop once, was posting from her book tour in Italy. Fountains. Cobblestone streets. Pasta that probably cost more than my weekly groceries. A sigh escaped my lips, heavy and useless. This apartment, this life, wasn't what I'd planned. It felt small, suffocating. A thought, unbidden, slipped through a crack in the wall of my anxiety. God, I wish Bobby was here. He always knew how to make things fun. I shook my head, a sharp, sudden motion. Dumb, so dumb. Bobby was gone. A memory from a different life, a childhood that felt like it belonged to someone else. I squeezed my eyes shut. Thinking about that stuff never helped. Get your shit together, Kyle, I muttered to the empty room. Work! I turned back to the laptop. The blinking cursor was still there. Still waiting. Still judging. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Useless. My brain was just static. I grabbed a pen and a beat-up Moleskine notebook from the clutter on my desk. Maybe I could break the block by hand. Doodling sometimes helped. My hand moved, but I wasn't really guiding it. I was just watching it go, a strange, detached observer. A shape formed on the page. A circle. 2 letters inside it, linked together. A stylized K and a B. My breath caught in my throat. I hadn't drawn that symbol in 20 years. It was our secret sign. Kyle and Bobby, the kings of the cul-de-sac. We'd carved it into trees, drawn it in chalk on the sidewalk, etched it onto the back of our school binders. Seeing it now, scrawled in my own handwriting, felt wrong. Like digging up a grave. Just as the thought crossed my mind, something else arrived. Not a thought, but a fully formed idea. A whole scene playing out behind my eyes like a movie. It was for my book. A man, a secondary character, tied to a chair in a damp basement. He's being questioned. But there's no shouting, no threats, just a quiet, calm voice asking him about a secret. The scene was vivid. I could smell the mildew. I could see the single bare bulb swinging overhead, casting long, dancing shadows. The dialogue was sharp, cruel, and better than anything I'd written in months. It wasn't my style. My writing was thoughtful, meditative. This was brutal, efficient. What the hell? I whispered. The air in the room suddenly felt cold. Where did that come from? It was like someone had just opened a file in my brain and clicked paste. The excitement of a good idea was there, but underneath it was a deep, unnerving chill, a feeling that I hadn't come up with it on my own. I flinched, but my hands were already moving. I lurched back to the laptop, pushing the notebook aside. My fingers flew across the keyboard, a frantic clatter in the quiet room. The words poured out. I wasn't crafting them, I was just transcribing them. The scene unfolded on the screen, word for word, exactly as I had seen it in my head. The dialogue, the description, the slow, mounting dread. It was good. It was really good. I didn't stop. The block was gone, shattered. Another scene came, then another. I was writing about my protagonist now, but my mind kept drifting back to the man in the chair. I gave him a name. Leo. But as I wrote, his face kept morphing into someone else's. A kid's face. Tousled brown hair. A chipped front tooth. The ghost of a freckle on his nose. Bobby. I was writing about Bobby, a grown-up, broken version of him. It felt like a betrayal, but I couldn't stop. My fingers had a mind of their own. I wrote for what felt like hours, the world outside my window dissolving into a dark smudge. Then I came to a new scene. Leo, Bobby, was trying to escape. A chase, a frantic scramble through a dark warehouse. I described him climbing a rickety metal shelving unit. I described the rusted bolts giving way, the sickening crunch as he hit the concrete floor from 30 feet up. I typed the final words. His eyes stared sightlessly at the ceiling. Click. The lamp on my desk went out. The glow from my laptop screen became the only light in the room. Flicker, flicker, flick, flicker. The overhead light in the kitchen flashed on and off in a violent, chaotic strobe, illuminating my messy apartment in spastic snapshots. One moment, I saw the pizza box. The next, a stack of books. The next, my own terrified face reflected in the dark window. Then, total darkness and silence again, save for the hum of the computer. My heart was a fist pounding against my ribs. Coincidence. Just a power surge. Old building, faulty wiring. That's all it was. It had to be. That's when my phone rang. It was on the other side of the room, on the arm of the sofa. The screen lit up the darkness with an insistent pulse. The ringing was loud, shrill, a fire alarm in the dead quiet. I stumbled over, my legs shaky. I squinted at the screen. Unknown caller. My thumb hovered over the decline button. Don't answer it. Don't be an idiot, Kyle. But I had to know. My hand was trembling as I swiped to answer and put the phone to my ear. Hello? My voice was a croak. Silence. Then, a sound. A wet, crackling noise, like someone trying to speak through a mouthful of water and static. An open-line hiss that felt far too loud. Hello? Who is this? I demanded, trying to sound angry instead of terrified. The static crackled, and underneath it, a whisper. So faint, I almost missed it. A child's voice. A voice I hadn't heard in 2 decades, but recognized instantly. Wrong, I screamed. It wasn't a word, just a raw animal sound of pure panic. I threw the phone. It hit the far wall and clattered onto the bed in the adjoining room. I scrambled back, tripping over the leg of the coffee table and crashing onto the floor. My breath came in ragged, painful gasps. My whole body was shaking. It was a prank. It had to be. Someone found out I was writing about him. Someone was messing with me. Mark Jennings, that smug bastard? No, it couldn't be. How could he know? How could anyone know what I was writing right at this second? How could they get that voice? What the hell is happening? I whispered to the floorboards. I pushed myself up, my back against the sofa. I sat there, curled into a ball, listening. The apartment was silent again, the kind of silence that feels heavy, the kind of silence that's listening back. I strained my ears, trying to hear anything. The hum of the refrigerator, a car passing on the street below, anything normal. But there was nothing, just my own blood roaring in my ears. I felt it before I heard it. A shift in the air. A feeling of pressure like when you go too deep in a pool. The intense, primal certainty that I was not alone. My eyes were glued to the entryway of my bedroom, a dark rectangle leading to the bed where my phone lay. I held my breath, trying to make myself smaller, invisible. Creak. The sound was soft, quiet. But in the crushing silence, it was as loud as a gunshot. It was the sound of wood moving, a slow, deliberate groan. It came from the bedroom, from the closet. The closet door, which I always kept shut because the hinge was broken and it swung open on its own. I didn't move. I couldn't. My muscles were locked, my body frozen in a state of pure terror. My gaze remained fixed on the dark doorway. I could see the edge of the bed in the gloom. I could see the faint outline of the closet door, now open just a crack, a sliver of deeper blackness in the dark. I sat there. Time stopped. My lungs burned for air, but I refused to make a sound. I just watched the doorway, waiting for something to step out. A minute passed. 2. The silence stretched, thinner and thinner, until it felt like it was about to snap. Nothing happened. The silence was worse than the sound had been. The waiting was an agony. Finally, a surge of adrenaline, cold and sharp, cut through the paralysis. Run, The single word screamed in my head. But I couldn't run. Not without my keys. Not without my phone. My phone, which was on the bed in that room. Screw it. I launched myself off the floor. I didn't tiptoe. I sprinted. 3 frantic steps, and I was in the bedroom doorway. My hand slapped against the wall, fumbling for the light switch. I found it, flicked it. The room flooded with cheap yellow light. I blinked, my eyes adjusting. I saw the bed. My phone lying face down on the crumpled comforter. My gaze snapped to the closet. The door was wide open. With a choked sob, I lunged forward and ripped it the rest of the way open, ready to fight, to scream, to do anything. There was no one there. Just my clothes hanging on their hangers, a pair of old sneakers on the floor, a dusty box on the top shelf. It was empty. Completely empty. Relief washed over me, so intense it made my knees weak. I leaned against the doorframe, gasping for air, a hysterical laugh bubbling in my throat. I was losing my mind. The deadline. The stress. I was having a breakdown. That was it. That had to be it. I imagined it all. The flicker. The voice. The creak. All in my head. I let out a long, shuddering breath and straightened up. I looked at the bed, at my phone. I needed to call someone. My sister. A doctor. Anyone. I walked over and picked it up. The screen wasn't broken. It lit up as I turned it over. The screen wasn't on the home menu. A Notes app was open. The generic one that comes with the phone, the one I never use. A new note had been created. There was a single line of text, written in the default font. It was like a punch to the gut. All the air left my body. The blood drained from my face. The words on the screen said, "See, I didn't die like that. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. I just sat on the floor, my back pressed against the sofa, watching the dark rectangle of the bedroom doorway. My phone was a dead weight in my hand. The screen was black. I had turned it off, a useless, childish gesture, as if that would erase the words. I didn't die like that. The afterimage of the text was burned onto my retinas. I saw it every time I blinked. Sometime before dawn, my body gave up. I must have dozed off because I woke up with a sharp crick in my neck and the gray, unforgiving light of morning filtering through the dusty windows. The apartment looked even more pathetic in the daylight. The pizza box, the pile of bills, the stacks of books, they weren't just messy, they were evidence. The scene of a life going nowhere. My first coherent thought was to check the phone. My hand shook as I powered it on. The boot-up screen felt like an eternity. I navigated to the Notes app, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. I scrolled through the list. A half-finished grocery list. A password I'd forgotten. An idea for a short story from 2 years ago. The note from last night was gone. Relief washed over me, so potent it made me dizzy. It never existed. A stress-induced hallucination. A waking nightmare brought on by too much caffeine, too much pressure, and the suffocating weight of my own failure. The phone call, the voice, the creaking closet door, it was a story I told myself. A horror story my brain wrote because it couldn't write the one I was getting paid for. It made a sick kind of sense. I stood up, my joints cracking. I had to get back to normal work. That was the cure. Write something real, something of my own. And this phantom would fade. I walked to the kitchen and made a pot of coffee. The actions, methodical, grounding. I didn't look at the closet in my bedroom. With a fresh mug steaming next to my laptop, I sat down. The screen was still black from where I'd rebooted it. I opened my manuscript. The cursor blinked. The page was blank. The scene I'd written last night, the scene that felt like it had been channeled from somewhere else. I had deleted it in a fit of panic before the phone call. Now, nothing. The well was dry again. The panic from last night was replaced by the familiar, cold dread of incompetence. My fingers rested on the keyboard, lifeless. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to picture my characters, their world. All I saw was a flash of a rusted shelving unit, a body hitting concrete. "Let me help." The voice was in my head, a whisper, clear as day. It was the same child's voice from the phone, but closer, intimate. I flinched, my eyes snapping open. My chair screeched as I pushed back from the desk. "No," I breathed. The word a puff of air. I was losing it. For real this time. I stood up and paced the small living room. Get a grip, Kyle. You're just stressed. It's not real. I needed more coffee, a walk, anything to clear my head. I went back to the kitchen, my back to the desk, and poured another cup. My hands were trembling so badly that hot coffee sloshed over the rim, scalding my fingers. Shit! I ran my hand under cold water at the sink. I took a deep, shuddering breath. Okay, you're okay. I turned around, and I froze. The page wasn't blank anymore. A long paragraph of text now filled the screen. It wasn't the violent scene from before. It was something else. Something worse. My eyes scanned the words, and the air soured in my lungs. Kyle knew the sticky shame of a secret. He remembered the feel of the glossy cover of the X-Men comic under his jacket, his heart pounding, not with the thrill of the heist, but with the terror of being caught. It was Mikey Gallo's comic, his prized possession. When Mrs. Davison asked the class who had taken it from Mikey's desk during recess, Kyle had felt every eye on him. He saw Mikey's face, red and blotchy, his lower lip trembling. And Kyle said nothing. He let the silence hang in the air, a thick, greasy thing. He watched as Mrs. Davison's gaze settled on Danny Foster, the kid who always got into trouble, the easy target. He remembered the hot, prickling relief as Danny was led to the principal's office. He remembered throwing the comic book in a dumpster on the walk home, the secret a hard, sharp rock in his gut. The coffee mug slipped from my numb fingers. It didn't shatter. It hit the worn linoleum with a dull, heavy thud, splashing brown liquid across the floor. I had never told a single soul about that. Not my parents, not my sister, not a single friend. It was a stupid, trivial childhood memory, but the shame of it was still sharp, still real. A secret buried for 25 years. A secret that had just appeared on my computer screen, typed out in perfect, cruel detail. It was written in my own narrative style, woven seamlessly into the chapter I was supposed to be writing, as if my protagonist had stolen a comic book, not me. How? How could it know that? Taco! The fear was different now. This wasn't a power surge or a prank call. This wasn't a hallucination. This was an invasion. Something was inside my life. Inside my head. I know everything, Kyle. The voice was gentle, a conspiratorial whisper from right behind my ear. I was always there. No, I choked out, stumbling backward until I hit the counter. No, you weren't. I lunged for the desk. I had to delete it. I had to get it off the screen. Get it out of my house. My hand grabbed the mouse, but the cursor was already moving. It glided across the text, smooth and effortless, highlighting the entire paragraph. My own hand felt like a dead thing, a passenger in its own skin. The cursor dragged the highlighted text. My stomach dropped. A chat window blinked open at the bottom of the screen. A new message. From me. To my editor, Sarah. The cursor moved to the message box. A right click. The paste option appeared. Click. The entire paragraph about the stolen comic book appeared in the chat window. The cursor, a tiny, malevolent arrow, drifted with chilling slowness toward the send button. No! Don't! Please! The plea was a raw, ragged sound torn from my throat. It was going to send it. It was going to expose me. This wasn't about the book anymore. This was about humiliation. It was a threat. I know your ugliest secrets, and I can tell anyone I want. My body moved on, pure instinct. I threw myself forward, past the desk, fumbling behind the tower of the PC. My fingers found the thick power cord, yanked it from the wall socket with all my strength. The screen went black. The computer's fan whirred down into silence. I collapsed to the floor, gasping, my chest heaving. I had stopped it. I had cut it off. I was shaking, sweat plastering my hair to my forehead, but I had won. I had pulled the plug. But the voice was still there. It wasn't coming from the dead speakers anymore. It was coming from the corners of the room, from the ceiling, from inside my own skull. It was everywhere. A soft, reasonable, terrifying sound. You need me, Kyle. Look what we did last night. Look at the words I just gave you. They're good words, aren't they? Better than anything you've written in years. Without me, that page is blank. Without me, you're just a failure with a pile of red ink bills. A fraud. A thief who hides in the dark. What are you? I screamed, clamping my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The voice was on the inside. Leave me alone! My scream was an ugly, desperate thing in the small apartment. I squeezed my eyes shut, pressing my palms into my skull until I saw stars. Get out, get out, get out, get out, get out. I rocked back and forth on the floor, a man unraveling. The voice stopped. The silence that followed was immense. Heavy. I stayed there, curled in on myself, for a long time. The only sound was my own ragged breathing. Slowly, the terror receded, leaving behind a hollow, trembling exhaustion. I was insane. That was the only answer that didn't break the laws of physics. I was having a psychotic break. The voice, the text, it was all me. My broken brain creating a monster to blame for my own inadequacies. Ping. The sound was small, but it cut through the silence like a razor. My phone. It was on the coffee table. The screen was lit up. My body felt like it was filled with lead. I crawled over to it, my hands still shaking. It was an email notification. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. I knew who it was from before I even read the name. From Sarah Vance. Subject, wow. My thumb trembled as I tapped it open. Kyle! Just got your message. I don't know what kind of creative breakthrough you just had, but my God, this is genius. The vulnerability, the shame, it makes him so much more real. This is exactly the depth we've been talking about. Keep it. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Send the rest of the chapter as soon as you can. Best, Sarah. My blood turned to ice. My message? I hadn't sent any message. I had pulled the plug. I scrolled down, my vision blurring. Below her signature was the forwarded content of my message. And there, attached to the bottom of the email, was a document. A single file. My shaking finger tapped on it. It downloaded. It opened. It was the paragraph. The one about the comic book. The one I had tried to delete. The one it had pasted into the chat window seconds before I killed the power. It had sent it. Somehow, it had sent it. The phone slipped from my hand. It didn't clatter on the floor. It just made a dull, plastic slap. I didn't pick it up. I stared at the spot where it lay, screen down on the faded hardwood. Sarah's email wasn't a hallucination. It was a receipt, a confirmation of a transaction I never made. The words I bled onto the page last night, the ones I tried to erase from existence, had been delivered, opened, and celebrated. This is genius! My body was a thing made of stone. The air was thick, heavy. I couldn't draw a full breath. Something had reached out of my head, through my computer, across the city, and touched my editor. It had used my shame as a key to unlock her praise. The buzz of the intercom was so loud, it felt like an electric shock. I flinched. A sharp, violent jerk that sent a jolt of pain up my spine. For a second, I thought it was another phantom sound, another trick from the thing in the static. But it buzzed again, long and insistent. Real. I stumbled to the wall panel, my legs unsteady. I pressed the talk button. My voice was a dry rasp. Who is it? It's me. Sleepyhead? Let me up. Leah. A wave of something that wasn't quite relief crashed over me. It was more like the terror just changed shape. Her voice was a lifeline to the normal world, but I didn't feel normal anymore. I was contaminated. I pressed the door button without a word. Her footsteps on the stairs were quick and light. A familiar rhythm. The sound of every other Tuesday morning. She always brought coffee before her first class. The door creaked open. Hey! You look like hell, she said. Her smile faltered as she took me in. The old t-shirt, the wild look in my eyes, the spilled coffee still puddled on the linoleum. She held up a cardboard tray with 2 large coffees in a paper bag. I come bearing caffeine and carbs. Figured you pulled an all-nighter. Something like that, I managed. She stepped inside, her presence filling the small, stale apartment with the scent of fresh coffee and her perfume. It was too bright, too alive. She put the tray on the kitchen counter, her eyes scanning the room. The mess, the dead computer. Me. Sarah forwarded me your email, she said, her voice soft. She turned to face me, her expression a mix of concern and genuine excitement. Kyle, it's incredible. That paragraph. The vulnerability of it. I've never read anything like it from you. My stomach coiled into a tight, cold knot. Where did this come from, Kyle? She asked, her eyes searching mine. It's so raw. It's not like you. The question hung in the air between us. The truth was a scream trapped in my throat. It wasn't me. Something is in my head. It knows things. It's writing through me. Help me. Lie. The voice was a whisper, a rustle of dry leaves right behind my ear. It was calm, persuasive. Tell her it was you. Take the credit. It's what you wanted, isn't it? I swallowed. The sound was loud in the quiet room. I don't know, I said, my gaze dropping to the floor. I just had a sudden burst of inspiration, I guess. The lie felt clumsy and sharp in my mouth. Leah's smile returned, though her eyes held a trace of confusion. Well, whatever it was, don't lose it. Sarah's ecstatic. She thinks this is the breakthrough. She picked up one of the coffees and pushed it into my hand. Her fingers were warm against my cold skin. I'm so proud of you. I wanted to throw the coffee against the wall. I wanted to tell her to run. Instead, I just nodded and took a sip. It burned my tongue. While she started cleaning up the spilled coffee from yesterday, I drifted back to my desk. I couldn't look at the dead computer screen. My eyes landed on a cheap, spiral-bound notebook I'd bought at the pharmacy. It was open. The pages were filled with my frantic scrawl, words, phrases, images, rusted shelves, concrete floor, a boy's red splotched face, the dumpster behind the 7-Eleven. They were notes. His notes. The ones he had been feeding me. Leah came up behind me, wiping her hands on a paper towel. Finally getting organized? She joked, then her eyes fell on the notebook. Her smile faded. What's this? Before she could lean in for a closer look, I slammed the notebook shut. My hand moved on its own, fast and possessive. I snatched it off the desk and held it against my chest. The motion was so sudden, so aggressive, that she took a step back. Kyle, what's wrong? Nothing, I snapped. The word was too harsh, too loud. It's just drafts. It's a mess. I don't want you to see it yet. Her brow furrowed. The warmth was gone from her face, replaced by a cautious, searching look. Okay. It's just, you've never been weird about me seeing your notes before. She pointed a finger at the notebook, at a little doodle in the corner of the cover I hadn't noticed before. A simple stick figure of a boy with a wide, toothy grin. What's that symbol? I glanced down. My blood ran cold. I hadn't drawn that. It's nothing! Just leave it, okay? I shoved the notebook into a desk drawer and slammed it shut. The sound echoed in the apartment. Leah crossed her arms. She wasn't smiling anymore. She wasn't proud. She was suspicious. You're being weird, Kyle. Really weird. What's going on? Are you hiding something from me? Her questions were daggers. Each one hit a nerve. I felt a surge of irrational anger. Her presence, which seconds ago had been a potential anchor, now felt like a spotlight. An interrogation. She is a problem. The voice was no longer a whisper. It was a clear, cold statement inside my skull. She asks too many questions. She looks too closely. She will get in the way. She will ruin everything. I need to work, Leah, I said. My voice was flat, lifeless. I didn't look at her. I looked at the dark monitor of the computer. That was where the magic happened. That was where the words came from. Work? Kyle, you look like you haven't slept in 2 days. Maybe you should take a break. We could go. No, I cut her off. I'm on a roll. I can feel it. I can't stop now. I need to be alone. The silence that followed was heavy with her hurt. I could feel her staring at the side of my head. I didn't turn. I couldn't. I was afraid of what she would see in my eyes. I was afraid of what I might see in hers. Okay, she said finally. Her voice was small, brittle. Okay, Kyle, if you need to be alone. I heard her pick up her purse from the counter, heard the soft jingle of her keys. She walked to the door and stopped, her hand on the knob. I knew she was waiting for me to say something, to turn around, to say sorry, to tell her I didn't mean it. Don't turn around. I stayed frozen, my back to her, my hands clenched into fists on my desk. The latch clicked. The door opened, then closed with a soft, final thud. She was gone. The apartment was silent again. The only sound was the frantic drumming of my own heart. I had done it. I had pushed her away. See? I breathed, the words coming out in a rush of air. I wasn't talking to myself. I was talking to him. That was too close. She almost saw. A feeling of cold satisfaction spread through the room, a change in the very pressure of the air. The voice that answered was smooth, pleased, a co-conspirator. See? I told you. It's just you and me now, Kyle. It's better this way. Quieter. We can get so much done. Just us. Always has been. I finally pushed myself up from the chair. My reflection stared back at me from the dark screen of the computer monitor. Pale, haunted. Then I looked past my own face, toward the living room. My gaze fell on the large, cheap mirror hanging on the wall opposite the couch. I saw my reflection there, too, a man alone in his apartment. But for a flicker of a second, a trick of the light, a twitch in my eye, I wasn't alone. Behind my reflected shoulder, the air shimmered. It distorted into the vague shape of a child. Small, taller than a child should be, somehow. Just an outline, a heat-haze silhouette against the bland wallpaper. But I saw the head tilt. I saw the suggestion of a wide, unblinking smile. I blinked, hard. A gasp caught in my throat. The shape was gone. It was just me. Just my own terrified face staring back. A hallucination. It had to be. My own mind cracking under the strain, projecting my fears onto the glass. I stumbled toward it, needing to prove it wasn't real. I reached out a trembling hand to touch the cool surface of the mirror. My breath hitched, fogging a small circle on the glass. I froze. Something was happening in the patch of fog. Slowly. Deliberately. As if an invisible finger were tracing a path through the condensation, letters began to form. They were stark white against the gray mist. Jagged, childish script. It was a simple message. 3 words. A death sentence. She is in the way. The mirror was wrong. The air was wrong. The silence was a solid thing pressing in on me. I didn't breathe. My gaze was locked on the smudged, childish letters fogging the glass. She is in the way. My own breath weaponized. My own terror made into a sign. My hand dropped from the glass. I backed away slowly, one step, then another, my bare feet making no sound on the old wood. I didn't take my eyes off the mirror. I half expected the letters to rearrange themselves to spell out my name, to add a new threat. They didn't. They just hung there in the cooling mist, a 3-word gospel of hate. Then, as the last of my breath dissipated, they vanished. Gone. Just like the shimmering shape behind me. Just like Leah. I turned my back on the mirror, a cold prickle running up my spine as if I was being watched. The apartment felt impossibly large, the corners filled with shadows. The ordinary clutter, a stack of mail on the counter, Leah's forgotten coffee cup, my discarded shoes by the door, seemed alien, props on a stage where something terrible was about to happen. It's just you and me now, Kyle. The voice was a low thrum in my bones, no longer a whisper from a hidden place, but a presence. A partner. A co-conspirator. I swallowed, my throat dry. I needed a distraction. I needed to do something normal. Work. The work was all that mattered. My laptop was dead. Useless. I jabbed the power button. Nothing. The screen remained a black, reflective void. I felt a surge of frustration, but the voice was calm, almost soothing. It's fine. It did its job. We'll get a new one. With our success. Our success. The words echoed in the empty room. I slumped into my desk chair, grabbing my phone from the floor where I'd dropped it. The screen lit up. A cascade of notifications. A text from Leah. Are you okay? Call me. Another, seriously, Kyle, you're scaring me. And emails. Dozens of them. Mostly junk, but one caught my eye. An automated newsletter from the publisher. Subject: Industry Buzz. Arrival to watch? I tapped it open, my thumb clumsy. I just needed to focus on something else. Something real. Something from the outside world where childish scrawls didn't appear on mirrors. The email was a slick piece of corporate cheerleading, congratulating my editor Sarah on her keen eye for a new, powerful voice in psychological fiction. My heart gave a stupid, hopeful leap. For a second I thought it was about me. It wasn't. The article was about some other writer, another one of Sarah's projects. A guy named David Thorne. It quoted Sarah effusively. David's work has a raw, untamed energy. He's exploring themes of memory and trauma in a way I've never seen before. We're expecting his debut to be a seismic event. The words felt like a slap. Themes of memory and trauma are themes. He'll steal your success, the voice hissed, no longer soothing. It was sharp now, edged with jealousy. He will win. No, he won't, I muttered, shaking my head. It's a big genre. People write about the same things. It's just a coincidence. But the rationalization felt weak, hollow. A paper shield against a coming storm. The apartment felt colder. I tossed the phone onto the desk. A coincidence. That's all. I stood up, paced the length of the room. The mirror drew my eye again. I deliberately looked away, focusing on the window, the grimy city street outside. Coincidence. But I couldn't shake the feeling. This Thorne guy. David Thorne. I went back to the desk, snatching up the phone. My fingers flew across the screen, tapping his name into the search bar. His author website was the first result. Professional. Clean. A black and white photo showed a man about my age, with a confident smile and annoyingly perfect hair. He looked like the kind of person who had never spent a single night staring at a ceiling, wrestling with a blank page, the kind of person who didn't need a ghost to write for him. I clicked on his blog. The latest post was from yesterday. The title was Tapping the Source. My blood ran cold. I read his words. The block is gone. For months, I was in the desert, and now it's like a dam has broken. The inspiration is relentless, a voice that won't be silenced. It's dark, it's primal, and it feels more honest than anything I've ever written. It's like it's being fed to me directly, a pure, unfiltered signal from the ether. A pure, unfiltered signal. The phrase hit me like a physical blow. I dropped the phone again. It wasn't a coincidence. How could this be happening? Was there some collective unconscious for broken writers, some dark fountain we were both drinking from? Or was this something else, something more personal, more malicious? My gaze drifted back to my dead laptop, the source of my inspiration, the conduit. I reached for the power cord, jiggling it in the outlet. I hit the power button again. And again. Miraculously, this time, the screen flickered to life. The startup chime sounded unnaturally loud. It booted slowly, groaning like an old man waking up. I held my breath. Finally, the desktop appeared. A mess of icons and folders. Everything looked normal. A wave of relief washed over me. I'd been overreacting. My mind was just connecting dots that weren't there, drawing patterns in the static. I clicked on the folder labeled Manuscript. I needed to see it. I needed to see the words he had written. To see the genius Sarah was so excited about. Double-click. The spinning beach ball of death appeared. The laptop's fan whirred, spinning faster and faster, a desperate, high-pitched whine. The cursor was frozen. "Come on," I whispered. "Come on, you piece of junk." The screen flickered, went black. Then a blue screen filled my vision. A string of error codes and a single, damning sentence in stark white text. Fatal system error. Unable to access drive. No, 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 no! I slammed my fist on the desk. The coffee cup Leah had left rattled. All of it. The new chapter. The notes. The raw, brilliant, terrifying paragraphs. Gone. Wiped out. The voice was back, and it was laughing. A cold, dry rattle inside my head. I tried to warn you. He's sabotaging you. He knows. Panic, hot and sharp, clawed its way up my throat. I stared at the blue screen. This wasn't a random crash. It couldn't be. The timing was too perfect. The email, the blog post, and now this. It was an attack. He's in your way, the voice whispered, its tone shifting, becoming a venomous suggestion. He's trying to erase you. You have to get to him first. You have to see what he has. You have to stop him. How? I gasped, the word torn from my chest. How can I do anything? The voice offered a simple, elegant, insane solution. His email. The one from his website. David Thorne writes at email.com. People are lazy, Kyle. People are predictable. The idea was a jolt of ice in my veins. It was crazy. It was illegal. No, I can't do that. That's insane. My hands, however, were already moving. They had a will of their own. I grabbed my phone, the screen still open to Thorne's website. My gaze flickered to his About Me page. Born in Willow Creek, Illinois. High school mascot, the Wolves. Married to a woman named Jessica. Dog named Buster. Predictable. I opened a new tab, went to the email login page, typed in David Thorne writes at email.com. The password field blinked at me. A dare. He'll win, Kyle. He'll be on the bestseller list, and you'll be here, in this room, with nothing. He'll take the credit for our pain, for our story. My fingers trembled over the keypad. I can't, I whispered. But the fear of losing everything, of being silenced, was a tangible thing. It had a weight, a texture. It was heavier than my conscience. I typed, Jessica. Incorrect password. I typed, Willow Creek. Incorrect password. I typed, Wolves 1. Incorrect password. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. This was stupid. I was chasing ghosts, building a conspiracy out of thin air. I was the one who was going crazy, not him. I should stop. I should call Leah. Apologize. Go outside. Get some air. Buster, the voice urged. A final, simple offering. Try, Buster. My finger hovered over the B. This was the last one. If this didn't work, I would stop. I would throw my phone against the wall and stop. I typed, Buster 123. I hit enter. The screen changed. Welcome, David. I was in. A wave of vertigo washed over me. I felt like I was falling. My breath came in, shallow, sharp gasps. I was looking at another man's private life. His inbox. A list of messages that were not mine to see. Emails from his wife, a newsletter from a brewery, a confirmation for a dentist appointment. Mundane. Normal. I wasn't looking for normal. My eyes scanned the subject lines, my heart pounding a sick rhythm against my sternum. I was looking for proof. For a smoking gun. My finger touched the search bar at the top of the screen. I typed, manuscript. A half-dozen emails appeared. I clicked on the most recent one, a chain between him and a friend named Mark. My eyes flew over the text, devouring the words. Mark, how's the book coming? Still wrestling with that ending? David, dude, you're not going to believe it. It's like a switch flipped in my head. The story is just pouring out of me. Had a massive breakthrough. Got an idea for a twist that's going to absolutely destroy people. My stomach twisted into a cold, hard knot. I kept reading. David, I'm telling you, this is the one. This is the idea that's going to beat everyone else to the punch. It's going to be huge. Beat everyone else. The words blazed in my mind. He knew. He had to know. This wasn't a race to the finish line. It was a war. Just as I was about to log out, a new email appeared at the top of the inbox. My body went rigid. The screen refreshed, silently, a new line of bold text materializing from the ether. The sender was Sarah. My Sarah. His Sarah. The subject line was two words that stopped the air in my lungs. The twist. My fingers shook as I tapped it. The message loaded. It was short, terse. A single sentence that signed my death warrant. David, this is brilliant. The imaginary friend angle is a game changer. Absolutely chilling. No one will see it coming. I froze. The phone slipped from my numb fingers, clattering onto the floor. I didn't see it. I didn't hear it. All I could see were those words, burned onto my retinas. The imaginary friend angle. He hadn't just stolen the theme. He hadn't just stolen the darkness. He had stolen my ghost. The words echoed, burned behind my eyes. The imaginary friend angle. My phone was on the floor somewhere. I didn't care. The blue light from the dead laptop screen painted the room in the color of failure. He hadn't just stumbled onto the same idea. He hadn't just been inspired by the same dark well. He had reached into my head, into my past, and pulled out my ghost. He had stolen Leo. He's going to win, Leo's voice said. It wasn't a hiss anymore. It was flat. A statement of fact. A death sentence. He'll publish first. Sarah will champion him. They will celebrate his brilliant, original mind. And you will be the echo. The copycat. The fraud. No, I said to the empty room. The word had no force. It was a dry leaf in a storm. My mind was a frantic mess, trying to connect impossible dots. How could he know? How could he have the same thing? Was it a thing? Was Leo real? Or was I just a convenient template for a story he was writing? A story where a writer goes crazy and thinks his imaginary friend is real? My breath came faster. The thought was a hook that snagged deep. What if I wasn't the one being haunted? What if I was the one being written? A character in David Thorne's masterpiece. My breakdown, my paranoia, my conversations with Leo, all just plot points for his bestseller. The idea was so perfectly, horribly symmetrical that it almost made sense. He's writing you out of existence, Kyle. Leo's voice sharpened, finding its edge again. He is typing the words that will erase you. Unless you do something. You have to slow him down. You have to stop the words. Stop? I laughed, a raw, ugly sound. How? Hack his publisher? Send a virus? This is reality, not a bad movie. He has a life. A physical space, a place where he types the words. You saw it. The website, the photos, the town. The thought was venomous. It seeped into the cracks of my panic. Slow him down. Not on a screen. In the real world. A place made of brick and wood and asphalt. No, absolutely not. I pushed myself up from the chair. I needed to get out. I needed air. I needed to call Leah and tell her she was right, that I was losing my mind, that I needed help. My hand reached for my pocket, but my phone wasn't there. It was on the floor. I knelt to pick it up. The screen was still on, still showing David Thorne's smiling, confident face on his author website. I couldn't look away. The kind of man who probably jogged in the morning, who had a golden retriever and a white picket fence. The kind of man who slept soundly at night. My finger, acting of its own accord, scrolled down. His bio. David Thorne lives and writes in the quiet suburbs of Northwood, just a short drive from the city. Northwood. I knew Northwood. It was a 20-minute drive, maybe 30 with traffic. Just look, Leo whispered, his tone coaxing, reasonable. Just see the place. See where your story is being stolen. Then you'll know. You'll know what you're up against. It won't change anything. My voice was a whisper. But I was already standing up. I was already grabbing my keys from the hook by the door. I was already walking out of my apartment, leaving the blue screen of death glowing behind me like a malevolent moon. The drive was a blur of streetlights and neon signs smearing across the windshield. The radio was off. The only sound was the hum of the engine and the incessant, calm stream of consciousness from Leo in my head. He wasn't shouting anymore. He was planning. He was reasoning. He was pointing out the sheer injustice of it all. Thorne, with his easy life and perfect hair, getting the credit for a pain that was mine. My isolation. My childhood's secrets. My ghost. Leo was my ghost. I found his street easily. It was exactly what I'd pictured. Quiet, lined with old trees and identical, well-kept houses with manicured lawns. A parody of suburban peace. I killed the headlights and coasted to a stop half a block down from the address I'd memorized. 1428 Elm Street. Of course. I just sat there for a long time, my hands gripping the steering wheel. The car was a dark, silent bubble in the middle of his perfect world. I could see the house clearly. 2 stories, dark blue siding, warm yellow light spilling from a large picture window on the ground floor. It was a beacon of normalcy. "He's in there," Leo said. "Right now. Probably typing. Deleting you 1 keystroke at a time." "I'm just looking," I muttered to myself. A justification. A lie. I wasn't just looking. I was hunting. Then, a shape moved behind the curtain. A silhouette. It was him. David Thorne. He wasn't typing. He was laughing. He turned and said something to someone I couldn't see. A moment later, a woman joined him. She looped her arm through his. Jessica, his wife, from the bio. She leaned her head on his shoulder. He kissed the top of her head. They stood there, framed in the warm light, the picture of contentment. A scene from a movie I would never be in. Something inside me snapped. A cold, hard wire of rage pulled taut. He was laughing. He was happy. He was living this perfect life while systematically dismantling mine, stealing my pain and packaging it for mass consumption. He was going to get rich and famous off my misery. The injustice of it was a physical thing, a sickness rising in my throat. "He's laughing at you, Kyle." The voice was a shard of ice in my ear. "He has everything. Your story, your success, a life. And what do you have? This car. This darkness. Me." The rage was boiling now, thick and black. I needed to do something. I needed to leave a mark, a sign that I was real, that I was here, that he couldn't just erase me. "Look," Leo said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "His motorcycle. By the curb. No one will know, Kyle. It's dark. A small thing. Just a little act of defiance. Let him know you're not a ghost he can just ride away. Let him know there's a cost." I saw it. A sleek, black motorcycle parked right in front of the house. A toy for a successful man. An easy target. My hand was on the door handle. My mind was a civil war. This is insane. Go home. You're crossing a line. You're becoming the villain. But another part of me, the part that was now fused with Leo, was screaming, "He started it! He invaded your mind! This is self-defense!" "Just slashing a tire," I heard myself say. "It's nothing. An inconvenience. That's all." The click of the car door opening sounded like a gunshot in the silent street. I slipped out, keeping low. The air was cool and smelled of damp leaves and cut grass. It smelled clean. False. I moved along the line of parked cars, a shadow in a world of sleeping houses. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. Every rustle of a leaf, every distant dog bark sent a jolt of electricity through me. I reached his motorcycle. It was bigger up close. Gleaming chrome. It smelled of gasoline and money. I fumbled in my pocket. My car key. The metal was cold against my sweaty palm. I crouched down beside the rear wheel. The rubber was thick, pristine. I could see my own distorted reflection in the chrome of the wheel hub. A hunched, dark shape. A predator. This was the moment. The final step off the ledge. I could still turn back. I could stand up, walk back to my car, and drive away. I could try to forget this, try to fight back the right way, call Sarah, argue my case, prove I had the idea first. "She won't believe you," Leo hissed, sensing my hesitation. "She'll think you're unstable. He's already won her over." She called him brilliant. What did she ever call you? Wabaramuza. The truth of that hit me harder than any physical blow. I closed my eyes. The image of Thorne laughing with his wife filled my head. The email from Sarah. The imaginary friend angle. My own name, Kyle, vanished. The struggling writer, the scared and confused man, he He was gone. In his place was only a raw nerve of vengeance. My hand, steady now, brought the key to the tire wall. I didn't hesitate. I jammed it in. Hard. There was a moment of resistance, then the metal bit deep. A sound ripped through the night. A sharp, violent P-S-S-S-S-S-S-S-S-S-S-S-S-S-S-S-S-H-H-H-H-H-H-H. It wasn't just the sound of air escaping. It was the sound of pressure being released. From the tire. From my chest. It was a deeply, horribly satisfying sound. The sound of a wound being inflicted. I pulled the key out and stared at the gash I'd made, watching the tire sag, crumple, and die. A grin stretched my lips. I did it. I stood up, a feeling of giddy, terrifying power coursing through me. I had left my mark. I had thrown a rock through his perfect picture window. I turned to walk away, to slip back into the darkness. Click. The sound was sharp, electric. The porch light of 1428 Elm Street flashed on, bathing the lawn and the sidewalk in a sudden, brilliant white. I froze. Panicked. I threw myself behind the SUV, parked in front of the motorcycle, my back slamming against the cold metal. My heart felt like it had stopped. He heard me. He was coming out. The front door opened. A silhouette appeared, black against the light. It was him. David Thorne. He walked to the edge of his porch. He didn't seem rushed or angry. He was calm. He surveyed the quiet street for a moment. Then his eyes drifted down to his motorcycle. He saw the flattened tire. I held my breath, waiting for the shout, the curse, the call to the police. None of it came. He stared at the dead tire for a long, silent moment. I could see the side of his face, impassive. Then, slowly, he lifted his head. He didn't scan the street. He didn't look left or right. His gaze moved with an unnatural precision, cutting directly through the darkness. It passed over the street, over the lawn, and settled right on the SUV I was hiding behind. He was looking right at me. Through the rear windshield, through the shadows. He was looking right into my eyes. And he wasn't surprised. He wasn't angry. A slow, small smile touched his lips. It was a smile of recognition, a smile of satisfaction. It was the smile of a man who had been waiting. The drive home was a fugue state. My hands were still shaking on the steering wheel. The image of Thorne's face was burned onto the back of my eyelids. That slow, knowing smile. A smile that said, I was expecting you. A smile that said, welcome to the game. It wasn't possible. It didn't make any sense. How could he know I was there? How could he look right at me? He's playing with you, Leo's voice was a low hum in my head, electric and alive. He wanted you to do it. He wanted you to cross the line. Shut up, I muttered, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. But I knew he was right. The rage from the street corner, the black, boiling tar of it, was still inside me. It had cooled into something solid, hard, something I could use. I slammed the apartment door behind me, the sound echoing in the stale air. The blue light from the dead laptop screen was still there, a tombstone in the corner of the room. I ignored it. I walked to my desk, my real desk, where my own manuscript waited. The keyboard felt cool under my fingers. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I just wrote. The feeling from before, the desperate block, was gone. Erased. In its place was a channel, wide open and gushing black water. The scene poured out of me. A character, cornered and robbed of his life's work, taking his first step into the darkness. He doesn't think. He doesn't reason. He acts. He finds his rival's prized possession, a vintage guitar, and he doesn't just smash it. He methodically, lovingly, carves a single word into the polished wood. Mine. The giddy, terrifying power I'd felt on that silent street surged through me again, but this time it was focused. It had a purpose. I wrote for an hour, maybe 2. The chapter was violent. It was sharp. It was the truest thing I had ever put on a page. It was a perfect portrait of vengeance. My vengeance. When I was done, I leaned back in my chair, my chest heaving. My heartbeat was a frantic drum. For the first time in months, I felt good. I felt powerful. I had taken back a piece of myself. Then my phone buzzed on the desk. The screen lit up. LIA. My stomach dropped. The manic energy vanished, replaced by a cold dread. "Don't answer," Leo whispered. The voice was smooth, reasonable. "She'll just spoil it. She'll hear it in your voice. She'll judge you. She doesn't understand what you're fighting for." I stared at the vibrating phone. The thought of talking to her, of trying to act normal after what I'd just done, felt impossible. My thumb hovered over the red decline button. It would be so easy. Just let it go to voicemail. Deal with it tomorrow. "She can't help you," Leo insisted. "She's not on your side." Not really, but a part of me, a small, flickering part, needed to hear her voice, needed a tether to something real. I took a deep breath. I pressed the green icon. "Hey," I said. My own voice sounded strange, too high. "Kyle? Oh, thank God." Leah's voice was tight with worry. It sounded like she'd been holding her breath. "I've been calling. Are you okay? You sounded, I don't know. You disappeared after Sarah's email." "I'm fine," I lied. "Just writing." "Writing? That's great, but, Kyle, I'm worried." A prickle of irritation. "You don't have to be worried. I'm fine." "She doesn't believe you," Leo murmured. "She thinks you're falling apart." There was a pause on her end. I could hear her take a breath. "Okay. I know you're going to think this is crazy, and maybe it is. Maybe I'm being crazy. But your notebook, the one you leave on the coffee table." I froze. The notebook. Pages and pages of scrolled notes, plot points, character sketches. And in the margins, over and over, the symbol I drew without thinking. The one Leo had shown me as a kid. A circle with a jagged line through it. Our secret sigil. "What about it?" I asked, my throat suddenly dry. "That symbol," she said, her voice dropping a little. "The one you draw all the time. The circle with the line. I was just tidying up and, I don't know, it just seemed familiar, so I Googled it. I'm so sorry, I know I shouldn't have, but I was worried and Googled it." "Leah, what the hell?" "She was spying on you," Leo's voice cut in, sharp as a razor, looking for evidence. "Building her case against you." I know, it was wrong, but listen," she said, talking faster now. It's a thing, Kyle. It's not just a doodle. It's from some old stories, urban legends. They call it the listener's mark. It's tied to all this weird, dark folklore about tulpa, about entities that feed on creative energy. The room felt suddenly cold. My blood turned to ice water. How could she know? How could she find that? It was a made-up thing from my childhood. A secret between me and Leo. That's just a coincidence," I said, but the words had no weight. They floated away like smoke. "Is it?" she pressed. "Kyle, the stories talk about artists, writers, people who become obsessed, paranoid. They start believing this friend is real, that it's helping them, but it just isolates them. It makes them push everyone away. It sounds..." She hesitated. "It sounds a little like what's happening to you." The prickle of irritation became a burning fire. It wasn't a coincidence. It was an accusation. She wasn't worried. She was diagnosing me. She was standing on the outside, looking in and calling me crazy. "See?" Leo's voice was triumphant. "Poisonous. I told you. She thinks you're sick. She's trying to control you. She read your story, and now she wants to take your muse. She wants to take me away from you." "Leah, you don't know what you're talking about," I said, my voice hardening. "It's a story. It's fiction. I know you have a vivid imagination, but this is different. The way you were on the phone earlier. You need help, Kyle." As she spoke, my eyes drifted across the room to the wall above my TV. There was a framed poster for an old noir film. A detective in a trench coat. A femme fatale with a ghost of a smile on her red lips. For a split second, a single heartbeat, the woman's face wasn't the actress's. It was Leah's. Her lips were pulled back in a sneer of pure contempt, a look of derision, mocking me. I blinked. The actress's face was back. Normal. But the image was seared into my brain. The hallucination was so real, so solid, it left an afterimage glowing in my vision. My heart hammered against my ribs. "You need help, Kyle?" Leah's voice repeated through the phone. But this time, I didn't just hear her worried tone. Underneath it, in my head, the words echoed with the sneer I had just seen, a threat disguised as concern. A doctor's sentence disguised as a lover's plea. The trap snapped shut. She wasn't on the outside. She was part of it, part of whatever was happening. She was working with them, with Thorne, to discredit me, to make me seem unstable, so he could steal my story without anyone ever believing it was mine in the first place. It all made a sickening kind of sense. "Don't you dare!" I snarled into the phone. The voice that came out of me was not my own. It was low and guttural, an animal's growl. Leah was silent for a second. "What? Kyle? What are you talking about? Don't pretend you care." I was on my feet now, pacing the small apartment like a caged beast. "Don't act like you're trying to help. You know nothing. You hear me? Nothing." "Kyle, you're scaring me," she said, her voice now small and trembling. The sound of her fear was like gasoline on the fire. "She's afraid because you're seeing the truth," Leo urged. "She's losing control. Push her away. Get rid of her. Now." "Help?" I laughed, a raw, ugly sound that scraped my throat. "You call this help? Going behind my back? Reading my private notes? Calling me a freak show from some internet story? Is that your idea of help?" "No, I was just... I love you." "No, you don't!" I screamed, the words ripping out of me, jagged and final. "You don't know a damn thing about me. I don't need your help. I don't need anyone's help, especially not yours." "Kyle, please. Don't call me again." I stabbed the red button on the screen. The call ended. Silence. It crashed down on me, heavy and absolute. The only sound was the frantic pounding in my ears and the hum of the computer. I stood in the middle of my living room, my phone clutched in a white-knuckled fist. The rage drained away, leaving a vast, hollow space behind. What have I done? A flicker of regret, of horror at myself. I had just destroyed the one good thing left in my life. I had screamed at the only person who was trying to reach me. Then the other voice came, soft, gentle, a comforting hand on my shoulder. "Shh. It's okay," Leo said. His tone was a balm on a raw wound. "You did the right thing. It had to be done. She was a weakness, a distraction. She was holding you back." I sank into my desk chair, my body feeling heavy as lead. My eyes stared at the dark screen of my monitor. I felt exhausted, scoured out. "She can't understand the pressure you're under," Leo continued, his voice wrapping around me like a warm blanket. "She can't see what Thorne is doing to you. But I can. I've always been here. It's just us now, Kyle. It's always been just us. You can trust me." I closed my eyes. He was right. Leah didn't understand. Thorne didn't understand. Only Leo understood. He was the only one who had seen everything. The loneliness. The theft. The rage. I could trust him. My eyes slowly opened. I looked at the computer screen. My manuscript was still open. The last word I had typed was mine. And then I saw it. Underneath my last sentence, the cursor was blinking. Waiting. As I watched, it moved. Not by my hand. I hadn't touched the keyboard. I hadn't touched the mouse. But the cursor blinked, moved to a new line, and words began to appear on the screen. Letter by letter, typed by an unseen hand. A single, short sentence appeared in the sterile white void of the page. A command. Now, keep writing. The words on the screen were a brand, a hot iron against my mind. Now, keep writing. My fingers trembled over the keyboard. I didn't want to. A small, sane part of me screamed to get up, to throw the laptop against the wall, to run out into the night and never look back. but I couldn't move. The command held me in my chair, a hook sunk deep in my spine. "He's right," Leo's voice soothed, a cool oil spreading over the fire of my panic. "This is the only thing that matters. This is how you win." My hands lowered. My fingers found the home keys. And I wrote through the night. The story wasn't mine anymore. It was a torrent, a black river bursting its banks, and I was just the channel it flowed through. Words became weapons. Sentences became razors. The character I'd created was no longer a victim. He was a hunter. He stalked his rival, not with brute force, but with a calculated cruelty that chilled me even as I typed it. He didn't just want revenge. He wanted to dismantle a life, piece by piece, until nothing was left but a hollowed-out man who wished for death. I wrote about sabotaging the rival's car. A small, precise cut to the brake line. Not enough to cause a fatal crash on the highway, no. Something more intimate. Something that would fail in a sudden, terrifying lurch in city traffic. Something to break bones, not take a life. To shatter confidence. To instill a seed of constant gnawing fear. It was brilliant. It was horrifying. It was perfect. When the gray morning light seeped through the blinds, I finally sagged back, a husk. My eyes burned. My back ached. The manuscript was 20 pages longer. 20 pages of the purest, most venomous prose I had ever conceived. I had done it. Sleep was a shallow, dreamless pit. I woke in the late afternoon to the smell of stale coffee and the buzzing of my phone on the floor. I ignored it. I stumbled into the kitchen, my body screaming for water. As I stood at the sink, gulping it down, I finally grabbed the phone. A dozen missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. A single link in a group chat with a few old college friends. I tapped it. A local news article loaded. The headline hit me like a physical blow. Local author Maxwell Thorne in stable condition after motorcycle accident. My heart stopped. My blood ran cold. I read the words again and again. Thorne. Accident. The article was short on details. A tire blowout on a city street. A resulting crash into a parked car. Multiple fractures in his right arm and wrist. His upcoming book launch, the one he stole from me, was postponed indefinitely. His writing hand. He broke his writing hand. A laugh, sharp and manic, bubbled up in my chest. I clapped a hand over my mouth, but it escaped, a raw, ugly sound in the quiet apartment. See? Leo's voice was a crow of delight in my head. A song of pure victory. I told you. It works. You thought it, and it happened. You won, Kyle! You fucking won! No, I whispered, shaking my head. The phone felt slick in my sweaty palm. It was just a story. A coincidence. It had to be. It was just a freak accident. Tires blow out all the time. It had nothing to do with me. Nothing. But the sick, electric thrill humming under my skin told a different story. The feeling of power, the knowledge that my rage, my desire for his ruin, had somehow reached out and touched the real world. It was terrifying. And it felt incredible. My phone buzzed again. A new text message. From Leah. My gut twisted. I almost swiped it away. I didn't want to talk to her. I didn't want to hear her voice, full of that fake concern that now felt like an accusation. But the message was already on the screen. Leah, did you hear about Maxwell Thorne? Awful news. So crazy. I'm actually at the hospital now visiting my cousin and saw him being brought in. He looks really bad. The world tilted. The words rearranged themselves in my head. Leah. Hospital. Thorne. My cousin. The words barely registered. They were just noise. Filler. The signal was clear. She was there. With him. She's lying, Leo hissed, his voice losing its playful edge, turning sharp and cold as ice. Visiting her cousin? What a pathetic excuse. She went there for him. As soon as she heard. They're together. Right now. That's not true, I muttered, pacing the length of my small living room. She wouldn't do that, wouldn't she? She spied on you. She read your notes. She called you crazy. She tried to take me away from you. Why? Because she's on his side. She was always on his side. I stopped in front of the noir film poster on the wall, the actress's face. I stared at it, half expecting it to change again. It didn't, but I didn't need a hallucination this time. I could see it perfectly in my mind. Leah, walking into Thorne's hospital room, her face a mask of worry. She pulls up a chair. She takes his uninjured hand. They talk in low voices. About me, he tells her. I'm unstable. A thief. She nods, agreeing with every word. Then they look at each other, and they laugh. A shared, secret laugh at my expense. The image was so clear, so real, it made me want to vomit. The air in the apartment felt thick. I couldn't breathe. Grief and rage warred inside me, a churning, acidic storm. She was supposed to be mine, my tether, my one point of light, and she had run straight to him, the man who had destroyed me. It was the ultimate betrayal. The final piece of the puzzle, clicking into its sickening place. They're plotting against you, Kyle. Leo's voice was a venomous whisper, right beside my ear. She's telling him everything. About the manuscript. About me. She's helping him build a case so no one will ever believe you. You have to go there. You have to stop them. You have to see it for yourself. My reason was gone, burned away by the jealousy and the certainty of my ruin. I didn't think. I just acted. I grabbed my keys, my wallet. I slammed the apartment door behind me, the sound echoing my own fractured state. The drive to the hospital was a red-tinted haze. Every stoplight felt like a personal affront. Every other driver was an obstacle. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel. My jaw was a block of cement. I was a predator closing in on its prey. I found a parking spot and ran, not walked, to the entrance. The automatic doors hissed open, releasing a wave of sterile, antiseptic air. The inside of the hospital was too bright, too clean. Nurses walked with brisk purpose. A PA system called for a doctor in a calm, disembodied voice. Everything was normal. It made my skin crawl. I got Thorne's room number from a bored-looking receptionist who didn't even look up from her magazine. Room 314, third floor. The elevator ride was an eternity. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic prisoner. When the doors opened, I stepped out into a quiet corridor. The squeak of my sneakers on the polished linoleum sounded like a gunshot. I crept down the hall, my back against the wall, moving like the hunter from my story. Room 310. Room 312. There it was. Room 314. The door was closed, but not all the way. A thin, vertical slice of light cut through the gloom of the hallway. I held my breath. I could hear voices from inside, a man's low murmur, and a woman's. Her voice. My blood turned to sludge. I moved closer, pressing my ear to the cold wood of the door, but the words were muffled, indistinct. It wasn't enough. I had to see. Slowly, carefully, I leaned forward until my eye was aligned with the crack. The scene inside snapped into focus. Thorne was in the bed, propped up by pillows. His right arm was in a massive white cast, held in a sling against his chest. His face was pale and bruised. And sitting in a chair beside him, so close her knee was almost touching the bed, was Leah. She was peeling an apple. The knife in her hand moved in a slow, steady spiral, carving the red skin away in a single, unbroken ribbon. Her head was bowed in concentration. She murmured something I couldn't hear. Thorne answered, his voice weak. He tried to smile. Leah looked up at him, and her face was filled with a tenderness, a profound concern that stabbed me right through the chest. It was exactly as I had imagined. Worse, this wasn't a conspiratorial laugh. This was intimate. This was real. This was the proof. This was my life's great love. Tending to the man who had stolen my soul. Everything went quiet. The sounds of the hospital faded away. The blood roaring in my ears fell silent. There was only the image, burned onto my retinas. Leah, the apple, and him. I pulled back from the door, melting into the shadows of the hallway. My body felt numb, disconnected. The rage was gone. The jealousy was gone. They had been burned away, leaving behind something cold and hard and clear, a single crystalline purpose. He had taken my story. He had taken my future. And now he had taken her. He had to be removed. Not just beaten, not just broken, removed, erased. Leo's voice returned. No longer a whisper, but a calm, resolute statement of fact in the center of my mind. Kill him, Kyle. She's watching him now. But if he's gone, she'll come back to you. She'll have to. Kill him, and she's yours again, forever. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking. Not from fear, not anymore. It was something else, an anticipation. For the first time, the thought wasn't an abstract fantasy on a page. It was a plan. It was an option. It was a door I was standing in front of, and my hand was reaching for the knob. The hospital smell clung to my clothes. Antiseptic and bad luck. I stood in the doorway of Kyle's apartment, the key still in the lock. It felt wrong to be here without him, but driving back to my own place felt wrong too. Everything felt wrong. The image of Maxwell Thorne, pale and broken in that hospital bed, was stuck in my head. And the look on Kyle's face when I'd called him from the hospital, it wasn't concern. It was something else, something sharp and cold. I pushed the door shut. The click echoed in the silence. I told him a lie, a small one. My cousin wasn't just being admitted. She was in the surgical wing, same as Thorne. I'd only seen him by accident, a fleeting glimpse of a gurney being wheeled past. But when I told Kyle, his voice changed. The connection felt like it was freezing over. Something had to give. This wasn't him. The Kyle I knew didn't have this darkness coiling behind his eyes. He didn't talk to himself. He didn't have a friend named Leo whispering in his ear. I started in the living room, not knowing what I was looking for. A clue, a reason, anything. His desk was chaos. Stacks of books, empty coffee mugs, crumpled notes. I ran a hand over the noir poster on the wall. The actress's face stared back, all shadow and suggestion. I moved to the bedroom closet, a place of old sweaters and forgotten things, maybe something from his childhood. His mom had shipped a few boxes over when he first moved in. He'd never even opened them. I pulled one down. It was heavy with dust. I sliced the tape with my thumbnail and folded back the cardboard flaps. Inside, old yearbooks and college textbooks. A faded baseball glove. Useless. I pushed it aside and pulled down another. This one was smaller, lighter. Inside, nestled between stacks of old comic books, was a wooden box. It was dark cherry wood, plain and unadorned, the size of a shoebox. I lifted the lid. The air that rose up smelled of mothballs and old paper. On top was a stack of photographs, held together with a brittle rubber band. I snapped the band and fanned them out. Kyle, age 7 or 8, a gap-toothed grin, standing in front of a merry-go-round. Kyle on a swing set, legs kicked high. Then, another boy appeared. Same age, with dark, serious eyes and a haircut that was too neat. In every photo, he was right next to Kyle. Their arms were slung over each other's shoulders. They were sharing a giant pretzel. They were making faces at the camera. They were inseparable. A name surfaced from a deep, foggy part of my memory. Leo. Kyle's friend. The one who had moved away. Suddenly. I never met him. It all happened before I knew Kyle. He never spoke of him. Beneath the photos was something else. I reached in, and my fingers brushed against cold, painted wood. I pulled it out. It was a marionette. A wooden puppet of a little boy, maybe a foot tall. It had jointed limbs and a simple, painted-on smile. Its hair was the same dark, neat cut as the boy in the pictures. Its clothes were a tiny red shirt and blue pants. Its eyes were 2 black dots, shiny and vacant. It was him. It was a puppet of Leo. A shiver, quick and unpleasant, went through me. Who makes a puppet of their best friend? I set it on the floor, its head lolling to one side. Its smile looked less friendly now. It looked fixed. I had to know. I left the box on the floor and grabbed my laptop from the living room. I sat on the edge of the bed, the puppet watching me from the carpet. My fingers flew over the keys. I didn't know Leo's last name. I tried a different search. Backquote, childhood accident fair Kyle's hometown, backquote. The results were a junk pile of local news and community events. I refined it. Backquote, amusement park accident, New Hope, Pennsylvania, 1998, boy, back quote. The link was from a local newspaper archive. The headline was stark. Tragedy at Silverwood Fairgrounds. Boy falls from Ferris wheel. My breath caught. I clicked. The article was short, the text digitized from an old print. It talked about a freak accident, a 9-year-old boy, an unsecured latch on the gondola door. He had fallen during the ride's descent. The details were sparse. The fall was fatal. For privacy reasons, the family had requested the boy's name not be released. The date of the accident was October 12, 1998, the same year Kyle said Leo had moved away. No, it couldn't be. Coincidence. It had to be. New Hope wasn't a huge town, but it wasn't that small. But a cold certainty was taking root in my stomach. The evasiveness, the forgotten friend, the suddenness of his move. Everyone just stopped talking about him. I needed to talk to someone who knew, someone who was there. I found my phone and dialed Kyle's mom. She picked up on the third ring. "Leah, honey, is everything all right?" I tried calling Kyle, but he didn't answer. Her voice was warm, familiar. "He's going through some things, Sharon. That's why I'm calling, actually. I had a question about his childhood." "Oh?" The warmth cooled by a degree. "What about?" "I was looking at some old photos of him and his friend Leo." Silence. A dead, heavy silence on the other end of the line. The kind of silence that's louder than a scream. "Sharon? Are you there?" "Yes," she finally said. Her voice was thin, brittle. "That was a long time ago, Leah." "I know. I was just curious. Kyle never talks about him. I was just wondering what happened to him, where his family moved to." "They moved," she said. It was a statement of fact, but it felt like a wall being built. "It's not something we talk about. It was a hard time for Kyle." "How was it hard?" "They were best friends, weren't they?" I pressed, the cold feeling in my gut growing colder. "Sharon, I found an old article about an accident at the Silverwood Fair." A sharp intake of breath. "You shouldn't have done that." The last of the warmth in her voice was gone, replaced by a flinty edge. "Kyle doesn't remember any of that. The doctor said it was for the best. A mercy. You need to leave it alone. Do you hear me, Leah? For his sake, leave it alone." "What doesn't he remember?" "Sharon, what happened to Leo?" "I have to go." The line went dead. I stared at the phone. My heart was a hammer against my ribs. She didn't deny it. She confirmed it. They were all hiding something. Hiding it from Kyle. "He doesn't remember." The words echoed in my head. He built a whole new friend, a whole new Leo, because his mind couldn't handle what happened to the real one. The trauma, it had split something inside of him. My eyes fell on the puppet. It sat on the floor, propped against the leg of the bed, mocking me with its stupid, painted smile. The doctor said it was for the best. This was the source. This was the wound. Leo wasn't an imaginary friend. He was a ghost. A memory so horrible Kyle's brain had literally buried it and then built a fantasy on top of its grave. Rage and a terrible pity washed over me. They left him like this. They let him walk around with this ticking time bomb in his head instead of helping him face it. I knelt on the floor and picked up the marionette. Its wooden limbs clacked together. It felt heavier than it looked. Colder. This wasn't just a toy. It was a relic. A totem. The centerpiece of a forgotten trauma. I turned it over and over in my hands. The paint was worn smooth in places, chipped on the edges of its tiny wooden shoes. Its back was a solid piece of wood, painted red for its shirt. My thumb traced the lines of its back. I felt it. A tiny, almost imperceptible line that wasn't part of the wood grain. A perfect straight seam running down its spine. It was almost invisible. My heart started to pound again. A low, thick drumbeat. I slid my fingernail into the crack. It was a latch. A tiny compartment carved into the puppet's torso. My hands were shaking now. I worked my nail under the edge and pried. With a soft, dry click, the small wooden panel popped open. It was hollow inside. Empty. No, not empty. There was something in there. A tiny piece of paper, folded into a tight, dense square no bigger than my thumbnail. It was yellow with age. Carefully, I tipped the puppet over, and the little square of paper fell into my palm. It felt fragile, ancient, My fingers fumbled as I unfolded it, the creases stiff and deep. It took a moment to smooth it out. It was a page torn from a child's notebook. The blue lines were faded. On it, written in thick, clumsy pencil strokes, were 4 words. The letters were big and uneven, pressed so hard into the page they had almost torn through it. The handwriting of a furious, determined child. Kyle's handwriting. It said, "Leo is mine. Forever." The paper was still in my hand. 4 words in a child's furious scrawl. A promise. A curse. The air in Kyle's apartment was stale, filled with the dust of old memories and the fresh stench of a new, terrible truth. The puppet's hollow body lay on the floor like a tiny corpse. He didn't just lose his friend, he claimed him. My mind raced. Sharon's words on the phone. He doesn't remember any of that. The doctor said it was for the best. A mercy that had festered into this darkness that wore Kyle's face. What they had buried hadn't died, it had just changed. I needed to talk to someone. Not Sharon, not the police. Someone who understood the other side of this. The victim. My fingers were clumsy on my phone's screen. I found the number for the hospital information desk. My voice was a dry rasp. "Maxwell Thorne's room, please." A moment of hold music, thin and tinny. Then a click. A man's voice, rough with pain and sleep. "Hello? Mr. Thorne? Maxwell, this is Leah, Kyle's girlfriend." A pause. I heard a grunt, the sound of someone shifting in a stiff hospital bed. "Yeah, I remember. I am so sorry for what he did. There's no excuse but—" "Save it," he cut me off, his voice sharper now. Not angry, just focused. "I don't care about the apology. I care about why it happened. I don't think it was an accident." My breath hitched. "What do you mean?" "Leading up to the incident," he said, the word hanging in the air. "I was getting emails, anonymous. They were quoting me. Quoting lines from my manuscript, ideas I hadn't shared with anyone, accusing me of stealing them." A cold dread washed over me. I sank onto the edge of Kyle's bed, the puppet's vacant eyes staring up at me. "Stealing them from who?" I whispered, though I already knew the answer. "From him. From Kyle. The email said I was a thief, that I took what was his." It was Leo's voice. Leo's words funneled through Kyle's fingers and an anonymous email address. He was protecting his territory, his writer. "It was him," I said. My own voice sounded distant. Or the thing inside him. Another weary sigh from the other end of the line. "After I got here, I had a lot of time to think. And to search. I'm a writer. It's what I do. I looked him up. Your boyfriend. His background. I found the old news stories from New Hope, Pennsylvania." "The fairground," I said, my heart starting to pound, a low, heavy drumbeat. "The accident." "That's the thing." Maxwell's voice was low, intense. "I kept digging. I didn't just read the first article. I went deeper. Cross-referenced hospital admissions, public records. It wasn't easy. The family wanted privacy. But here's the sign. Here's the part that changes everything." I held my breath. The silence on the line stretched. "His friend," Maxwell said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "The boy from the Ferris wheel. Leo. He didn't die." The room tilted. My hand flew to my mouth to stifle a gasp. Not dead? The words didn't make sense. The ghost. The trauma. The entire foundation of this horror was built on a grave. If there was no grave, what was this thing? Not dead? I finally managed to choke out. "That's impossible. Sharon, his mother, she all but confirmed it. Everyone said he moved away. It was a cover story for his death." "It was a cover for something else," Maxwell countered. "He survived the fall. Barely. The family did move away. They moved him to a long-term care facility. He's been there ever since. My mind reeled, trying to process the information. It was like finding out the monster in your closet was real, but it wasn't the monster you thought it was. It was something older, something worse. Where? I demanded. Where is he? He gave me the address. Oak Haven Care Facility. About an hour's drive away. A quiet place for lost causes. Severe traumatic brain injury, Maxwell explained, his voice clinical, detached. Minimal cognitive function. He's alive, but he's not there. He can't talk, can't write, can't communicate. He's been a prisoner in his own body for 25 years. A sick realization dawned on me. Kyle hadn't just buried a memory. He had buried a person. He'd walked away from the wreckage of his friend's life and let his mind build a shrine to a ghost, because the reality was too much to bear. The guilt, the shame, it hadn't gone away. It had mutated. It had become Leo, a walking, talking personification of his denial. So Leo, the voice Kyle hears, it's a manifestation? A psychological break? It's the ultimate alibi, Maxwell said. His mind couldn't handle the guilt of abandoning his friend, so it created a version of him that never left, a version he could control. But it soured. That guilt is telling him to punish anyone who gets close, anyone who could take his place. Like me, like you. The threat was suddenly sharp, personal, focused on me. A plan, desperate and terrible, began to form in my mind. The only way to kill a ghost is to prove it doesn't exist. We have to show him, I said. We have to make him see. What are you saying? I'm saying the only way to save Kyle is to put him in a room with the real Leo. There was a long silence. I could hear the faint beep of a machine in his room. That's dangerous, Leah. You don't know what he'll do when that delusion shatters. It's more dangerous not to, I insisted, a strange, cold resolve hardening inside me. This thing is getting stronger. It made him attack you. What's next? What happens when it decides I'm a threat he needs to finish? The unspoken question hung between us. What's the plan? He finally asked. The drive back to my own apartment was a blur. The plan was insane. It was a Hail Mary pass in the middle of a minefield. But it was the only plan we had. I got home, the silence of my own space offering no comfort. Every shadow seemed to move. Every creak of the floorboards was a footstep. I picked up my phone. My thumb hovered over Kyle's name. This was it. The point of no return. I took a deep breath and hit call. I put it on speaker. Maxwell was listening in on his end. A silent witness. It rang twice. Leah! His voice was flat. No warmth. No anger. Just a void. Kyle, I said, forcing my own voice to sound light normal. It was the hardest acting I'd ever done. Where are you? Out. Can you come over? To my place? Why? The question was sharp, suspicious. I could almost hear the other voice in his head. She knows. It's a trap. I want to see you, I said, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. I have a surprise for you. Something I think you need to see. A long pause. I imagined him standing on a street corner somewhere, his phone pressed to his ear, his eyes looking at nothing. I pictured Leo whispering to him, a frantic, paranoid hiss. She's going to betray you. She's with him. The writer. You have to finish it before she does. I pictured Kyle's hand slipping inside his jacket, his fingers closing around the cold handle of a kitchen knife from his block. The image was so clear my own hand started to shake. I'm on my way, he said, and hung up. The click of the disconnected line was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a starting gun. Time warped, minutes stretched into eternities. Every car that passed on the street below was him. Every distant siren was for me. I stood by the window, peering through the blinds. I didn't turn on the lights. The plan required him to walk into a scene already set. An hour later, a taxi pulled up to the curb. Kyle got out. He moved with a purpose I hadn't seen in months. A predator's gait. He paid the driver and walked towards the entrance of my building without looking up. He didn't see me. My heart hammered against my ribs. I turned from the window. He's here, I whispered into the phone, which was still open, lying on the counter. Be careful, Leah. Maxwell's voice crackled back, small and distant. I ended the call and slipped the phone into my pocket. I moved to the living room, waiting. The only light came from a single floor lamp in the corner, casting long, distorted shadows across the room. Next to the lamp was a wheelchair. In it a man sat, his head lolling slightly to one side. His hands lay limp in his lap. His eyes were open but unfocused, staring at a patch of wall. The facility had been reluctant. It took all of Maxwell's legal and financial persuasion to arrange a 1-hour off-site visit with a quiet, discreet orderly who now waited in a car down the block. It was unethical. It was probably illegal. It was our only chance. I stood beside the wheelchair, my hand resting on its cool metal frame. A strange calm washed over the panic. This was it. I heard the key slide into my apartment lock. The sound was deafening in the silence. The lock turned with a soft click. The door swung inward. Kyle stepped inside, silhouetted against the brighter light of the hallway. He closed the door behind him, plunging the entryway into near darkness. For a moment he just stood there, letting his eyes adjust. I could see the tension in his shoulders, the tight set of his jaw. His right hand was in his jacket pocket. "Leah?" he called out, his voice low. I didn't answer. I just stood there. He saw me then, a shape in the dimness. He took a step forward, and another. His eyes were locked on me, trying to read my expression in the gloom. "What is this?" he asked. "What's the surprise?" He took one more step, and the light from the floor lamp finally caught him. His eyes flickered from me to the shape beside me, to the man in the chair. He stopped. His body went rigid. His gaze was fixed on the stranger. On the gaunt face, the slack jaw, the dark hair. On a face he hadn't seen in 25 years, but a face his soul had never forgotten. His mind scrambled, trying to connect the vibrant, laughing boy from his memories with this broken, empty shell. But the recognition was there, a spark of horrible, undeniable knowing in his eyes. His hand slid out of his pocket. It was empty. The name left his lips in a choked, broken whisper, a sound of glass shattering. "Leo?" The single word hung in the air, thin and fragile. "Leo?" For a heartbeat, nothing happened. The world was frozen in that single syllable of disbelief. I saw it on Kyle's face. The shock. The confusion. His eyes darted from the slack, vacant face in the wheelchair to my own, searching for an anchor in a sea of impossibility. This was it. The moment the fever would break. The moment the ghost would be banished by the harsh light of reality. I held my breath, my knuckles white on the back of the wheelchair. He took a shaky step forward. His mouth opened, then closed. He looked at the real Leo again, at the drool glistening on his chin, at the unfocused eyes that saw nothing. He saw the catheter bag strapped to his leg. He saw the atrophy in the limbs that once climbed a Ferris wheel with him. This is where you break, I thought. This is where the guilt comes crashing down. Then he smiled. It wasn't a real smile. It was a crack in a porcelain mask, something awful showing through from underneath. A low sound started in his chest. A chuckle. It was the most terrible sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a plan coming together. He looked right at me, the smile widening, his eyes turning to black ice. The voice that came out of his mouth was not his. It was deeper, rougher, laced with a smug cruelty I had only heard in my nightmares. "You think this will work?" the voice rasped, a perfect imitation of a tormentor. "Stupid?" The air left my lungs in a silent rush. The floor seemed to drop out from under me. My plan. Our plan. It wasn't a cure, it was a trigger. An activation switch. The cold metal of the wheelchair beneath my hand felt like it was burning my skin. Something was wrong. Something was horribly, terribly wrong. Maxwell wasn't here. No one was coming. It was me, Kyle, and the man he had broken 25 years ago. "Kyle," I whispered, my voice a thread. He tilted his head, the cruel mask of a smile still fixed on his face. The voice, his own this time but stripped of all warmth, answered me. It was calm, flat, like a doctor giving a terminal diagnosis. "You think it controlled me?" he asked, tapping a finger against his temple. "You think I'm the victim here, Leah?" I took a step back. My heel hit the leg of a side table. The world narrowed to his face, his eyes. The friendly, broken man I loved was gone. He had never been there at all. In his place was this thing, this cold, calculating stranger wearing his skin. "You think there was some ghost?" he went on, taking a slow, easy step toward me. "Some psychic parasite? A trauma manifestation?" He listed the possibilities as if reading from a textbook, a sick amusement dancing in his gaze. He knew. He knew what I'd been thinking, what I'd been investigating. He had been listening to me the entire time. Not just with his ears, but with some other, sharper sense. "You people and your stories." He shook his head, a gesture of mock pity. "There was never an it," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "There was only me." My mind refused to work. It was a broken machine, gears grinding against each other with a screech. No ghost. Only him. The whispers, the paranoia, the attack on Maxwell, it was all him. The pieces didn't fit. They couldn't fit. It was a truth too monstrous to hold. "No," I managed, shaking my head. The voice, I heard it on the recording. "Leo." "Leo," he said, the name tasting like a fine wine on his tongue. He gestured with an open palm toward the shell of a man in the wheelchair. "Poor Leo. He gave me the greatest gift of my life." He took another step. I took another step back. My back hit the cool plaster of the wall. Trapped. Leo wasn't a trauma, Leah. Leo was an alibi, a brand, the struggling artist haunted by his tragic past. He spread his arms wide, a grand, theatrical gesture. Leo was the excuse I needed to do things that good Kyle would never dare. Leo wrote the angry emails. Leo sabotaged the competition. Leo whispered that everyone was a threat, a thief, an enemy. He gave me permission. He was confessing, not with guilt, but with pride. My blood ran cold. The phone was a lead weight in my pocket. If I reached for it, I was dead. The door was on the other side of the room, past him. The window was 2 floors up. I was in a box with the monster, and I had just shown him I knew he was there. "I didn't steal Maxwell's manuscript," Kyle said, his eyes gleaming. "I improved it. I took his mediocre ideas and I made them brilliant. Because Leo isn't afraid to be brutal. He isn't afraid to take what he deserves." He paused, his gaze flicking to the wheelchair and back to me. "I'm not haunted. I am the ghost." My eyes darted around the room, looking for a weapon, a lamp, a book, anything. My gaze landed on the heavy bronze base of the floor lamp beside the wheelchair. It was too far. He was too close. He saw where I was looking. The smile returned. "Don't," he said, his voice a soft command. Then his right hand went into his jacket pocket. It moved with an unhurried, deliberate motion. It wasn't the frantic, fumbling gesture of a man out of control. It was the smooth, practiced movement of a predator. He pulled out the knife. It was one of mine. A paring knife from the block in my kitchen. The blade was small, only 3 inches long, but it glinted in the single spot of light from the lamp. It looked sharp. It looked hungry. A scream built in my throat, hot and sharp. My body was coiled, a spring wound too tight. Fight or flight. My mind screamed both. My legs were numb. "Kyle, please," I begged. It was a stupid, useless sound. I wasn't talking to Kyle. He started walking toward me, knife held loosely at his side. He moved with the same predatory grace he'd had walking into the building. Purposeful, inescapable. "All I ever wanted," he said, his voice low and intimate, "was a quiet place to work. A little support, someone who understood. I really thought that was you, Leah. I really did." He was 3 feet away. "But you couldn't just leave it alone, could you?" he hissed, his face contorting with sudden rage. "You had to dig. You had to go talk to him." "To Maxwell." "You had to bring this," he spat the word, gesturing with the knife toward the wheelchair, "into my home, into our home." My instincts took over. There was no thought, only action. I launched myself off the wall, not at him, but to the side. Toward the wheelchair. Toward the lamp. He was faster. His left hand shot out and snagged the front of my shirt, twisting the fabric until it choked me. He yanked me forward, off balance. I slammed into his chest, the air knocked from my lungs in a painful gasp. His arms snaked around my waist, pinning me against him. I could smell the stale coffee on his breath. The knife. His other hand brought the knife up. I grabbed his wrist with both of my hands, pushing with all my strength. His muscles were like steel cables. The point of the blade hovered an inch from my stomach. Let me go, he grunted, his face next to mine, his teeth bared. I twisted, trying to wrench free. We stumbled together, a grotesque, violent dance. The floor lamp went over with a deafening crash, plunging the room into near-total darkness. The only light was the dim glow from the streetlights outside the window. His grip loosened for a split second. It was enough. I shoved him with everything I had. He staggered back, tripping over the downed lamp. He went down hard, a sharp curse slicing through the dark. I scrambled away on my hands and knees, my breath coming in ragged sobs. I didn't run for the door. My mind had one insane thought. Leo. I lurched to my feet and lunged for the wheelchair. I had to get him out. I didn't know why. It was just a primal need. A witness. A victim. He couldn't stay here for this. I grabbed the handles, trying to turn the chair toward the door. The wheels caught on the thick rug. From the floor, Kyle let out a laugh. It was a raw, unhinged sound this time. As I struggled with the chair, I looked at the man in it. The real Leo. His eyes. For the first time, they seemed focused. They were wide. They were staring at Kyle on the floor, then at me. And they were filled with a pure, undiluted terror I recognized as my own. A sound came from his throat. A low, wet, gurgling moan. The sound of a trapped soul screaming. He was in there. He was watching this whole nightmare unfold all over again. A hand clamped down on my shoulder like a vice. Kyle was up. He spun me around. His face was a mask of fury in the dim light. You, he seethed, his grip tightening, his knuckles digging into my bone. You ruined my perfect story. He shoved me hard. I stumbled back, catching myself on the wall. The knife was still in his hand, but he wasn't looking at me anymore. He didn't even see me. His entire focus, a laser beam of pure, possessive madness, had shifted. He took a step toward the wheelchair. He reached out, not with a knife, but with his free hand, and gently, almost tenderly, brushed a strand of dark hair off the other man's forehead. He leaned in close, his lips almost touching Leo's ear. His voice was a soft, chilling whisper that filled the entire room. "See, Leo," he murmured. "I told you. No one gets between us." The words hung in the darkness, a poison in the air. A vow, a threat. My mind couldn't hold them. They slipped through my fingers like sand. No one gets between us. The tenderness in his voice was the most horrifying part. It was a lover's whisper. He wasn't looking at me. I was just a piece of furniture he'd knocked over. His world had shrunk to the two of them, the monster and his broken toy. My breath was a blade in my throat. I had to move. The door. I had to get to the door. I took a half step, a silent shuffle against the rug. His head snapped around. He heard. His eyes found me in the gloom, and the soft mask vanished. A storm of pure rage took its place. He lunged. Not with the knife, with his whole body. He shoved me, both hands flat against my chest, a single violent explosion of strength. I flew backward, my feet tangled, the world spun. My head hit the sharp corner of the end table. Hard. A flash of white light exploded behind my eyes. A sound like a camera shutter clicked deep inside my skull. Click. The room tilted and fell away. Sunlight. Too bright. It beat down on my neck. The air smelled of wet concrete and rust. My hands were small. Scraped. A boy's hands. My hands. A shape was in front of me. Another boy. Dark hair, a smear of dirt on his cheek. Leo. He was holding something. A puppet, carved from a single piece of wood, its painted face chipped and smiling, a stupid, empty smile. It was mine. I wanted it. No, I needed it. Give it back, a voice said. My voice. high and thin. Whiny. Leo shook his head, clutching the puppet to his chest. He was on a higher level. We were in a skeleton, the bones of a house that wasn't built yet. A playground of concrete slabs and steel bones sticking out of the ground. We weren't supposed to be here. A long drop was right behind him. A few feet of empty air, then a basement floor littered with rocks and splintered boards. I found it, Leo said. It's mine now. It's not, I insisted. The anger was a hot coal in my gut. It was a familiar heat. It felt good. My dad gave it to me. A lie. The easiest thing in the world. He knew it was a lie. I saw it in his eyes. He opened his mouth to say so. I couldn't let him. I couldn't let him win. I couldn't let him have the one thing I wanted. I climbed up to his level. We were face to face. The sun was a hammer. I could feel the heat radiating off the rebar next to my leg. Give it to me, I said, pushing his shoulder with each word. He stumbled, but didn't fall. He held the puppet tighter. No, Kyle, stop. The world narrowed to that puppet, to his stupid, defiant face. A voice whispered in my ear. It didn't come from anywhere. It came from inside me. He thinks he's better than you. Take it. Show him. The anger flared. It wasn't just a coal anymore. It was a fire. It filled my chest, my arms. It gave me strength. I didn't just push him. I shoved. One hard, deliberate motion. All my weight. All my rage. His eyes went wide. Surprise. Then fear. His arms flew out, but he wasn't holding the puppet anymore. It was falling with him. He made a small sound, a gasp, as his feet left the concrete edge. Then he was gone. For a second, there was only the sound of the wind. I crawled to the edge. I looked down. He was a crumpled shape on the floor below. He wasn't moving. One of his legs was twisted at an angle that wasn't right. The puppet lay a few feet from his outstretched hand, its stupid smile facing the sky. I didn't scream. I didn't cry for help. The hot fire in my chest was gone. Now there was just a cool, quiet space. I watched him for a long time. Watched to see if he would move. He didn't. Then I stood up. I walked down the makeshift ramp of dirt and wood. I stepped over a stray pipe. I walked right past his still body. I didn't look at his face. I bent down. I picked up the puppet. It was mine now. Click. The sound again. The room slammed back into focus. The dim light from the street, the overturned lamp, the dark shape of Kyle standing over me, the other shape in the wheelchair. I was on the floor, my head throbbing with a clean, sharp agony. The pain was an anchor. It pulled the memory up from the mud and held it out in front of me. It wasn't Kyle's memory. It was mine. The truth was not a ghost. It was not a story. It was a concrete floor and a boy who didn't move. There was no friendly Kyle who was broken. There was no Leo the trauma. There was a boy who pushed another boy off a building. There was a man who let me believe I was the victim. He didn't create a personality to excuse his actions. He just used my own. He didn't steal my repressed trauma. He was my repressed trauma. He was the secret I'd created him to forget. Every whisper, every moment of paranoia, every suggestion of violence, it wasn't him corrupting me. It was him reminding me. It was him calling to a part of me that had been there all along, the boy on the construction site, the boy who took what he wanted. Leah? Kyle's voice cut through the fog. He sounded worried. He was kneeling beside me, his hand hovering over my shoulder. The knife was gone. His face was a mask of concern. Leah, are you okay? You fell. I stared at him, really looked at him. The lie was so perfect, so complete. He was good. He'd had 25 years to practice. The fog in my head was gone. The shock, the panic, it had all burned away. What was left was a silence that was clearer than any sound, a kind of sanity that was much, much worse than madness. I wasn't the victim here. I was the monster's accomplice. Get away from me, I said. The words were flat. They had no heat, no fear. They were just stones dropping into a well. He recoiled, the hurt on his face looking so real it almost made me laugh. What? Leah, I I pushed myself up, my arms shaking. My gaze wasn't on him. It was on the man in the wheelchair. Leo. The real Leo. His eyes were still wide, still locked on me. He'd been watching. He'd seen the memory flicker behind my eyes. He knew. Of course he knew. He was there. The gurgling sound started in his throat again, louder this time. A broken engine trying to turn over. Kyle stood up, his gaze following mine. He looked from me to Leo. The confusion on his face slowly melted away, replaced by a cold, dawning comprehension. The game was over. He saw it in my eyes. I remembered. He didn't look angry. He didn't look scared. A slow smile spread across his lips. It was a smile of relief, of recognition, like meeting an old friend. There you are, he breathed. I looked back at the man in the chair, the ghost of our shared past, the living monument to my sin. All this time, I'd been trying to save him from Kyle, but Kyle was never his demon. I was. A coldness spread through my chest, a calm acceptance. All the pieces clicked into place. I looked at Leo, at his ruined body and his terrified eyes, and I spoke to him. Not to Kyle, to him. The words came out in a quiet whisper, a truth I hadn't known I possessed until this second. You should have stayed dead. A tremor went through Leo's body. His jaw worked, slack muscles fighting a war they had lost decades ago. A terrible, wet, rasping noise tore from his throat. It was not a moan. It was not a gurgle. It was a word. A single, clear word, scraped raw from the ruins of his voice, filled with a quarter-century of silent hatred. Devil. The word hung in the air between us, scraped raw from a throat that had been silent for 2 decades. Devil. The sound didn't fade. It soaked into the wallpaper, into the carpet, into the space between my ribs. It was a brand. My eyes were locked on Leo, on the ruin of a man in a wheelchair who had just named me. His chin trembled, his eyes, wide with a fear I now understood was meant for me, started to water. Then Kyle's smile broke the spell. It wasn't the relieved, welcoming smile from a moment ago. This was something else, a final curtain rising. It was slow, knowing, and it wasn't directed at me. He was looking at Leo. It was a smile of ownership. The artist admiring his finished, broken sculpture. He took a step toward the wheelchair. A sound exploded against the front door. Not a knock, a fist, a heavy, solid thump that shook the whole wall. Police! Open the door! Thump, thump, thump. Another voice, sharp and commanding. We have a report of a disturbance! Open the door now! Kyle didn't flinch. He didn't even look toward the sound. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. A man bothered by a buzzing fly during an important meeting. He sighed, a soft puff of air, as if this whole intrusion was a dreadful inconvenience. He turned his head slowly, looking at me. The smile was gone, replaced by a look of shared disappointment. They're interrupting the best part, he said, his voice a low, casual murmur. The door splintered. Wood screamed as the frame gave way. The door flew open, slamming against the inside wall. The room was flooded with bodies. Blue uniforms, black vests, guns drawn and low. A tangled mess of arms and legs and shouts. Police, don't move. Show me your hands. Hands! Hands where I can see them. I was a rock in a river of chaos. I didn't move. I couldn't. The world had become a series of still images. The officer in front, his face tight, mouth a hard line. The red dot of a laser sight dancing on the wall just past my head. The dark, gaping hole of the ruined doorway. Kyle raised his hands slowly, palms open. There was no fear in his movement, no panic. It was a gesture of theatrical surrender. He wasn't complying with an order. He was playing a part. It's all right, officers, he said, his voice calm, reasonable. There's been a misunderstanding. 2 cops moved on him, fast and efficient. They twisted his arms behind his back. The clicks of the handcuffs were sharp, metallic sounds in the loud room. He didn't fight. He didn't even tense up. He let them handle him like a mannequin. His gaze drifted away from them. It swept past me. It swept past Leo, whose gurgling breaths were now lost in the noise. His eyes found what they were looking for, the laptop. It was on the small writing desk in the corner, screen glowing, open to a Word document filled with text. Pages and pages of it. His story. He stared at it, not with the desperation of a man whose life was over, but with the quiet pride of a creator. An officer was starting to secure the room, his eyes scanning everything. He saw the laptop. He saw Kyle's fixed stare. "What's that?" the officer asked, his voice rough. "What's on the screen?" The chaos seemed to quiet for a second, just for a second. All I could hear was the hum of the refrigerator. Kyle turned his head, a slight, difficult motion with his shoulder pinned. A real smile touched his lips now. It reached his eyes. It was pure, honest. "A masterpiece," he said. They were moving him toward the door. The machine of law enforcement was efficient. Voices crackled on radios. Someone was calling for paramedics for Leo. I was just a piece of furniture they walked around. As they guided him past me, Kyle turned his head. His body kept moving, but his eyes locked on mine. I was standing now, though I didn't remember getting up. My legs were shaking. A question clawed its way up my throat. It was a stupid question. A pointless question. The answer was all around me. In the broken door, in the broken man in the wheelchair, and the memory of a boy falling through empty air. But I had to ask. It was the last piece of the old world I had to let go of. "Why?" The word was a crack in my voice. "Kyle, why?" He leaned in. The officers didn't stop him. It happened in a second. His face was close to mine, his breath warm against my ear. He wasn't speaking to me, the girl he lived with. He was speaking to his audience, to his witness. "Art requires sacrifice, my love," he whispered. The words were not an apology. They were a dedication. Then he was gone, pulled through the doorway and out into the night. I stood there. The words echoed in my head. Art. Sacrifice. He wasn't insane. Insanity was chaotic, broken. This was the opposite. This was a design. A perfect, horrible design. He hadn't been hiding a monster. He had been cultivating a story. My forgotten sin wasn't his burden. It was his inspiration. My breakdown wasn't a tragedy. It was his plot. Leo's half-life wasn't a weight on his conscience. It was his magnum opus. 2 paramedics came in with a gurney. They were quiet, professional. They talked in low tones as they checked Leo's vitals, as they carefully prepared to move him. Leo's eyes were closed. His face was slack. He looked like he had used up the last of his strength to say that one word. Devil. An officer approached me. He had a kind face, old and tired. "Ma'am, are you Leah?" I nodded. The motion felt strange, disconnected from my brain. "We're going to need you to come down to the station," he said softly, "just to give a statement. We need to understand what happened here." I looked at him. I wanted to laugh. Understand what happened here? You can't. You see a domestic dispute, a man snapping, an assault. You see evidence and victims and perpetrators. You don't see the truth. The truth is that a boy pushed another boy 25 years ago. The truth is that the boy who pushed created a friend in his head to carry the blame. And that friend took over, grew up, and decided to write it all down, using our real lives as his ink. How do you write that in a police report? I let him guide me toward the door. As I stepped over the splintered wood of the frame and into the flashing red and blue lights, I glanced back one last time. The room looked like a stage set after the play was over. The overturned lamp, the wheelchair, now empty, the glowing screen of the laptop on the desk. One of the younger officers was standing beside it, reading. He had his hand on his chin. He looked fascinated. The patrol car was cold. The vinyl seat stuck to my skin. I watched through the cage as they put Kyle in the back of a different car. There was no struggle. He slid onto the seat as if it were a limousine. He looked straight ahead, through his own windshield. I could see his face in the intermittent flash of the emergency lights. Red, blue, dark. Red, blue, dark. He wasn't looking at the chaos. He wasn't looking at the neighbors gathered on their lawns, faces pale with worry and curiosity. He was looking at something far away. I knew that look. I'd seen it when he was deep in thought, working on a project. I used to think it was focus, intense concentration. I was wrong. It was rapture. He wasn't a prisoner in a cage. He was a visionary, seeing his future. He wasn't seeing prison bars. He was seeing headlines. The puppet master killer. He was seeing talk show hosts saying his name with a mix of fear and awe. He was seeing his laptop screen on the evening news, a screenshot of his words displayed for millions. He was seeing the fame, the infamy, the one thing he had always craved, the thing his mundane life with me could never have given him. It was a perfect ending. The friend he had been a vessel for was gone. The frightened boy, the charming boyfriend, the whispering manipulator, they were all gone. They had melted together. He was whole now. He was complete. He was Kyle. And Kyle was the author. I closed my eyes. I could see it too. A book cover. Stark and simple. On it, a photograph of a small, hand-carved wooden puppet. Its face chipped, smiling that stupid, empty smile. And the title, in clean, bold letters, My Friend. It would be a classic. A legend. And we were all just characters in it. An officer sat in the passenger seat of my car. We hadn't moved yet. He turned to look at me through the cage. He was young, his face still holding some hope in it. He can't hurt you anymore, he said. The words were meant to be a comfort. A final period at the end of a nightmare. But the nightmare wasn't over. This wasn't an ending. It was a publication date. I looked from the young officer's earnest face to the back of Kyle's head in the car ahead of us. The lights painted him red, then blue. He was so still, so patient. My voice was flat when I spoke. No heat, no fear. Just a cold, hard fact dropping into the quiet of the car. Hurt me? I said, my gaze fixed on him. He didn't want to hurt me. He didn't want to hurt anyone. The young cop looked confused. Ma'am, I cut him off, my eyes never leaving Kyle. He just wanted the credit. 1 year. 365 days of trying to scrub the feel of police car vinyl from my skin. Of learning to sleep with the light on. Of teaching my hands not to shake when I picked up a pen. The coffee in my mug was cold. I was working from home now, a soul-crushing data entry job that paid just enough for this tiny apartment where the neighbors fought at 3 a.m. and the pipes groaned like a dying man. It was perfect. The noise was a shield. The anonymity, a fortress. I stared at the spreadsheet on my laptop, a grid of meaningless numbers. My finger hovered over the mouse, the cursor blinking on a newsfeed sidebar. I never clicked. It was a rule. No news about him. No true crime podcasts. No late-night specials with dramatic reenactments. My phone buzzed on the cheap particle board desk. A news alert. I glanced, ready to dismiss it. The headline was a punch to the gut. Leaked manuscript of Puppet Master Killer becomes underground sensation. My breath caught. A block of ice formed in my stomach. I jabbed a finger at the screen, shutting it off. The screen went black, but the words were still there, burned onto the back of my eyelids. Sensation. The word he would have chosen himself. I squeezed my eyes shut. It's nothing. A bunch of freaks on the internet. It has nothing to do with me. I repeated it like a mantra. It has nothing to do with me. I picked up my cold coffee and forced myself to swallow. The liquid tasted like dirt. A sound at the door, not a knock. A solid, deliberate rap. 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 3 times. A familiar pattern. My heart didn't leap. It just sank. I knew who it was. I walked to the door, my socked feet silent on the worn floorboards. I looked through the peephole. The distorted, fisheye lens showed me Leo. He was standing, not sitting. A dark wood cane was gripped in his right hand, but he stood on his own 2 feet. His face was thinner, etched with lines that hadn't been there before, but his eyes were clear. The fog was gone. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door. Leo! Leah! He gave a small, tired smile. You're a hard person to find. That's the point. I stepped back to let him in. He moved slowly, with a careful, measured limp. Every step was a victory. The small apartment seemed to shrink around him. He looked around, taking in the single window, the sagging couch, the kitchenette crammed into one corner. It's clean, he said. It wasn't a compliment, it was an observation. Do you want some water? Coffee? Water is fine. I went to the sink, my back to him. I could feel his eyes on me. I filled a glass, my hand steady. A year ago, this would have been impossible. Now was just an action. Fill the glass, turn around, hand it to him. He was looking at the laptop on my desk. The screen was still black. "You saw the news," he said. It wasn't a question. I didn't answer. I just handed him the glass. He took it, his fingers brushing mine. They were cold. He took a long drink, then set the glass down on the cluttered coffee table. "They're calling it a masterpiece," he said, his voice flat. "On the dark web forums, the places where they trade school shooter manifestos like baseball cards, they're analyzing every sentence. They're calling him a genius of psychological horror." A wave of nausea washed over me. I sat down on the armchair opposite the couch. "The world is sick." "The world has always been sick," Leo corrected, his gaze sharp. Kyle just knew how to sell it a story it wanted to hear. He knew his audience. He tapped the head of his cane on the floorboards. The sound was a dull thud. "That's why I'm writing my own book." My head snapped up. "What?" "A book," he repeated. "Non-fiction, the truth, gaslighting, coercive control, the anatomy of a manipulator. From someone who was there, someone who lived it." His jaw was tight. "He doesn't get to own the story, Leah. He doesn't get to be the author. Not of my life." A part of me admired his fire, the raw will that had pulled him from that wheelchair and put him back on his feet. But a bigger part of me was just cold. So cold. "Don't," I said. The word was barely a whisper. "Leo, just let it go. Let it die." "It's not dying, it's growing. It's metastasizing." He reached into the inner pocket of his coat and pulled out a few folded sheets of paper. They were cheap printouts, the ink slightly smeared. He held them out. "You need to see this. You need to understand what we're up against." I shook my head. I didn't want to touch them. "No, you have to." His voice was insistent, hard. He leaned forward, pushing the papers into my lap. "He's not a monster in this story, Leah. He's the hero." My fingers felt numb as I unfolded the sheets. The text was dense, single-spaced. My eyes found my name first. Or the name he'd given my character, Ilara. I started to read. Ilara was a broken song, a melody shattered in its first verse. To love her was not to fix her. It was to hold the shards and bleed. I saw the beauty in her fragmentation, the poetry in her pain. The world saw a damaged woman. I saw a canvas, and I knew that to create the art she was destined to become, I would have to become the very thing she feared most. I would have to become her devil. My stomach twisted. The words were beautiful. They were seductive. They were lies wrapped in silk. I kept reading, my eyes scanning the page, jumping from paragraph to paragraph. The incident with the boy, the one they called my sin, was not an act of malice. It was a mercy. It was the first clumsy cut of the sculptor's chisel, separating the marble from the man. He was a cage, and I, even as a child, understood that Ilara needed to be set free. Her mind was a cathedral, and he was a termite, chewing at the foundations. I did not push him. I merely opened a door to the sky and let gravity sing its inevitable song. My breath hitched. He had reversed it. In his world, Leo was the monster. He was the cage, and Kyle was the liberator. It was a perfect, horrible design. The language was hypnotic, pulling you into his logic, making you nod along to the rhythm of his madness. It made you feel his burden, his sacrifice. It made you pity him. The trap wasn't the locked room or the police at the door anymore. It was these pages, this story that was spreading like a virus through the dark corners of the world, reframing him, sanctifying him. He had taken our trauma and polished it into a tragic epic, with himself as the misunderstood protagonist. I looked up from the pages, my vision blurry. Leo was watching me, his face grim. "He won," I whispered. The words tasted like ash. "Leo, he won. He's in a locked ward, but he won." He told his story, and they're believing him. "Not all of them," Leo said, his voice a low growl. "Not yet." But I wasn't listening. All I could see was Kyle's face in the flash of the cruiser lights. That look of rapture. He wasn't seeing prison bars. He was seeing this moment. He knew this would happen. He had planned it. The infamy, the legend, the credit. I stood up. My legs felt strangely steady. The cold in my gut had solidified into something hard and sharp. "Where is he?" I asked. Leo's expression changed. "Leah, don't. What are you thinking?" "The Blackwood Institute for the Criminally Insane," I said, the name coming easily to my lips. I had read it in the single newspaper clipping I'd allowed myself to see a year ago. "Is he still there?" "Yes, but you can't." "I need to see him." The decision was absolute. There was no room for debate. It wasn't about anger or revenge anymore. It was about an ending. My ending. Not the one he was writing. I needed to look at the author and close the book myself. "I'm going." The Blackwood Institute didn't look like a prison. It looked like a modern art museum designed by someone who hated art. All clean lines, gray concrete, and smoked glass. No fences, no visible bars. Just an unnerving sense of sterile containment. The inside was worse. It smelled of bleach and quiet desperation. Every door clanged shut behind me with the heavy finality of a coffin lid. I gave my name. I signed the forms. I put my purse and my phone in a small gray locker. A guard with a face like a stone tablet led me down a long, white corridor. The fluorescent lights hummed, a constant, low-grade buzz that vibrated in my teeth. "Visiting room 3, the guard said, pointing to a door. "You have 30 minutes. You're on this side of the glass. He's on that side. There's an intercom. Do not touch the glass. Understood?" I nodded. He unlocked the door and I stepped inside. It was a small, white box, 2 plastic chairs, a metal ledge, and a thick pane of reinforced glass that separated the room in two. I sat down on the cold plastic. My heart was a slow, heavy drum against my ribs. I wasn't scared. That emotion felt too simple, too clean for this. This was something else. A final pilgrimage to a cursed place. A minute passed. Then another. The humming of the lights was the only sound. Then a door opened on the other side of the glass. Kyle walked in. He wasn't in a straitjacket. He was wearing a plain gray jumpsuit. His hair was neatly combed. He looked calm, healthy even. The frantic energy was gone. The charming mask was gone. He was just a man who looked rested, content. He saw me. His eyes met mine through the glass. There was no surprise on his face, no anger, no remorse, just a flicker of mild, academic curiosity. He sat down in the chair opposite me, his movements unhurried. He folded his hands on the metal ledge in front of him. He looked like a professor about to interview a prospective student. He didn't reach for the intercom. He just watched me, a faint, knowing smile playing on his lips. He was waiting. This was his stage. I was his guest. I was supposed to scream, to cry, to demand answers. That's what he wanted. More material, more drama for the next chapter. I wouldn't give it to him. I leaned forward, my hands flat on the ledge on my side. I met his gaze. I let the silence stretch, fill the room, press against the glass. I watched the smug certainty in his eyes, the absolute peace of a man who believed he had achieved everything he ever wanted. He finally broke the silence. His smile widened, a gesture of pure satisfaction. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking past me at some future audience. He picked up a sheaf of papers from his lap, the same kind of papers Leo had shown me. He tapped them into a neat stack. Then, slowly, he lifted the top page and pressed it flat against the glass. It wasn't a page of text. It was a drawing, a pencil sketch rendered in meticulous, haunting detail. It was my face, my hair, my mouth, the shape of my chin. But it wasn't my face. The eyes were all wrong. They were hollowed out, dark pools of nothing. They were the eyes of a stranger, a ghost, the eyes of a character. Beneath the drawing, in clean, bold letters, was a single line of text. The protagonist for Part 2. I didn't wait for the guard. I stood up, turned my back on the glass, and walked out of the white box. The door clicked shut behind me. I heard another door open and close on Kyle's side. The show was over. The same stone-faced guard led me back down the humming corridor. I didn't look at him. I looked at the polished white floor. Left foot. Right foot. I retrieved my purse and my phone from the gray locker. I signed the form to check out. The pen felt heavy. My signature was a spiderweb of jagged lines. The glass doors of the Blackwood Institute slid open. The evening air was cool and smelled of cut grass. It felt wrong. The world outside should have been different. It should have been scarred, burnt, changed. But it was just a Tuesday. Cars drove by. A streetlight flickered on. The world hadn't noticed a thing. I got in my car and just sat there for a long time. The drawing. That was the real prison. Not the walls around him, but the lines he'd put on a page. He wasn't just writing a story. He was drawing a map for me to follow. He had created a character, Ilara, out of my pain, and now he was shoving me back into the role, the protagonist for part 2. It wasn't a threat, it was a casting announcement. My hands started to shake. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles were white. No, I wouldn't be his protagonist. I wouldn't be his broken song. I had my own story to finish. I started the car and drove. Not toward my apartment with its groaning pipes and shouting neighbors. I drove toward the only place that made sense. The only place where I could undo some of the damage. Where I could find an anchor. The Grayson Hills Rehabilitation Center was a low brick building surrounded by carefully tended flower beds. It smelled of floor wax and optimism. It was quiet here. A different kind of quiet than the asylum. This quiet was meant to heal. The woman at the front desk gave me a tired smile. "Here to see Mr. Crane again, Miss Heston?" "Yes." "Is he in the common room?" "He is. He had a good day today." One of the church volunteers brought in some crafts. Kept him busy. She buzzed me through a set of double doors. I walked down a clean, well-lit hallway. I could hear the low murmur of a television. I saw Leo before he saw me. He was in his wheelchair, parked near a large window that looked out onto a green lawn. He wasn't watching the TV. He wasn't looking out the window. He was staring down at something in his lap. I stopped in the doorway. It was a small wooden puppet, a marionette. It was crudely carved, with jointed limbs and a painted-on, smiling face. A gift from a church volunteer. A simple, harmless thing. But Leo was staring at it with an intensity that made my stomach tighten. His head was cocked to one side, his brow furrowed in concentration, as if he was not just looking at it, but listening to it. A small, stupid jolt of unease went through me. I pushed it down. He's a patient. His mind is recovering from a massive trauma. It's just a toy. I took a deep breath and stepped into the room. "Leo?" His head snapped up. The intense focus vanished, replaced by the familiar, slightly vacant look I knew. He blinked a few times as if coming out of a dream. A slow smile spread across his face. "Leah." His voice was a soft, breathy sound, the words still difficult for him. I walked over and knelt by his wheelchair. "Hey, how are you feeling today?" I put my hand on his. His skin was cool. He looked from my face down to my hand, then back up. He didn't answer the question. His eyes drifted away from me, toward the space just over my left shoulder, and he smiled. It was not the slow, happy smile he had just given me. This one was different. It was small, quick, a secret smile. The kind you share with someone when you both know a joke that no one else does. I felt a prickle on the back of my neck. I kept my voice even. "I had a rough day. I did something. I went to see him, Leo. I went to see Kyle." His smile faded, but he didn't look at me. His eyes were still fixed on the air beside my head. "Leo?" I managed. My voice sounded thin. "Are you listening to me?" He didn't seem to hear. He was completely absorbed by whatever he saw in that empty space. It was like I wasn't even in the room. "Leo? What are you looking at?" The silence was absolute. The murmur of the TV in the background seemed to die away. The air grew still. He didn't answer. He just kept staring. Then, slowly, his good right hand, the one not resting on the wooden puppet, began to lift. It trembled with a pained effort. The arm rose, finger by finger uncurling, until one bony index finger was extended, pointing. It was pointing directly at the empty space a foot from my face. His eyes widened. The vacant look was gone. Something else was there now. A light, an awareness, a sharp, terrifying flicker of intelligent curiosity. He looked fascinated, delighted, as if he were a child seeing a rare butterfly for the first time. My blood went cold. I whipped my head around. I looked over my shoulder, my heart pounding against my ribs. Nothing. There was nothing there. Just a beige wall, a framed print of a field of sunflowers, and empty air. I turned back to him. He was still pointing. A fear so sharp and pure it was like ice water flooded my veins. This isn't real. It's the stroke. It's a side effect of the trauma. He's hallucinating. People have hallucinations. It's medical. It's logical. Leo, I said, my voice shaking. There's nothing there. Leo, look at me. He wouldn't. His gaze was locked. I reached out and put my hand on his pointing arm, trying to gently push it down. His muscles were rigid. He was surprisingly strong. He wouldn't lower his arm. Then he started making a sound. It wasn't his usual strained attempt at speech. At first, it was just a whisper, a low, rhythmic hiss of air. I leaned closer, trying to make out what he was saying. Was he in pain? Was he trying to tell me something? Shh. CHK. Shh. CHK. The sound repeated. A pattern. A rhythm. And with a jolt that felt like an electric shock, I recognized it. It wasn't just noise. It was the cadence of speech. The specific, lilting, up-and-down pattern of a voice I had prayed I would never hear again. It was the whisper of Kyle. My hand flew to my mouth to stifle a scream. I stumbled backward, pulling away from him. Leo's head tilted. The whisper grew louder, clearer. He was forming words now. Not his words. Kyle's words. The words from the manuscript. A broken song, he whispered. His voice, a perfect, horrifying mimicry of Kyle's. A melody, shattered. He wasn't looking at the empty space anymore. He was looking at the wooden puppet in his lap. He was talking to it. The sculptor's chisel, he hissed, his eyes wide and bright. He picked up the puppet with his good hand, holding it up, separating the marble from the man. This wasn't a hallucination. This wasn't a stroke symptom. Kyle's poison wasn't just on the page. It had leaked out. It had found a new home. I backed away, step by horrifying step. My heel hit the leg of a chair, and I nearly fell. I couldn't take my eyes off Leo. He was holding a hushed, intense conversation with the wooden doll, his voice a flawless imitation of our tormentor. He was performing. He was playing a part. It hit me then. The truth. Not a truth that made sense, but a truth that settled in my bones with the weight of a tombstone. The thing Kyle had created. That friend. That voice of evil he had used to control me, to justify his horrors. It wasn't a demon he had summoned. It wasn't another personality. He didn't have a sickness. He had a story, a role, a script, a piece of evil so perfectly designed it could be taught, it could be learned, it could be passed on. Kyle was the author. But he wasn't the only actor. He had just groomed his replacement. I reached the doorway, my body trembling so hard my teeth chattered. The book wasn't closed. He hadn't just written a part for me. He had recast the villain, too. I had to get out. I turned to run. A new voice stopped me cold. It came from Leo's wheelchair. But it wasn't Leo's voice, and it wasn't Kyle's voice. It was high and clear. The voice of a child. It was coming from Leo's mouth, but his lips barely moved. His head tilted to one side. A gesture of innocent curiosity. The wooden puppet dangled from his fingers. He looked right at me. The knowing, secret smile was back on his face. The childlike voice spoke again, filling the quiet room. "Want to play with us, Leah?" The galley proofs for the marionette felt like cinder blocks in my lap. 312 pages of ink and paper that were supposed to be my final word. My testimony. I'd spent 6 months pouring every last drop of the poison out of my system and onto the page. The truth about Kyle, about what he did to me, to Leo, to the others. It wasn't literature. It was a police report of the soul. My apartment was quiet. I'd made sure of that. Top floor, no shared walls. The only sounds were the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sigh of traffic 3 stories below. It was a sterile, boring quiet. A healing quiet. Or so I told myself. I took a sip of cold coffee, my eyes blurring over a paragraph detailing the psychological architecture of coercive control. My own words sounded foreign, like something I'd read about someone else. Maybe that was the point. The doorbell cut through the silence. It was a sharp, two-tone chime that made me jolt. I wasn't expecting anyone. My editor communicated through email. My agent was in New York. I didn't have friends over. Not here. I put the manuscript aside, the pages sliding against each other with a soft hiss. I moved to the door, my bare feet cold against the hardwood floor. I looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty, just the beige wall and the scuffed baseboard. I frowned. Probably a delivery for the wrong apartment. I was about to turn away when I looked down. A box. A small brown cardboard box, sitting squarely on my doormat. No logos, no shipping labels, just a plain, anonymous cube. My first thought was the publisher. Some kind of stupid promotional gimmick. I opened the door, a flicker of annoyance in my chest. I snatched the box up and brought it inside, locking the deadbolt behind me with a heavy thud. It was light. I shook it, nothing rattled. I set it on the kitchen counter and went back to my manuscript. Forget it. It could wait. I had a deadline. I read the same sentence 3 times, but the words wouldn't stick. The box sat in my peripheral vision, a block of mute brown in my clean white kitchen. It was a question mark. Fine. I pushed back from my desk, the legs of the chair scraping against the floor. I walked back to the counter and tore at the packing tape with my fingernail. The cardboard flaps fell open. Inside, nestled in a bed of black tissue paper, was a book. Not a book, a journal. It was bound in soft black leather with no title, no markings of any kind. It was cool and smooth to the touch. I lifted it out. There was nothing else in the box. I felt a small, stupid wave of unease. A prank? A gift from a secret admirer? The idea was so absurd I almost laughed. I opened the journal. The pages were thick, expensive cream-colored paper. All of them were blank. Except for the first one. On the first page, written in the very center in elegant looping cursive, was a single sentence. The ink was a deep, stark black. The handwriting was perfect. It was a practiced, steady hand. It was Leo's hand. Not the spidery, pained scrawl of a man relearning how to hold a pen after a stroke. This was the confident script of an artist. Your ending is wrong. My blood went cold. My fingers went numb around the leather cover. How? How could he have sent this? Who delivered it? I pulled my phone from my pocket, my thumb fumbling to unlock it. I speed-dialed the Grayson Hills Rehabilitation Center. My heart hammered against my ribs. It rang 4 times before a woman answered, her voice tired and stretched thin. Grayson Hills, this is Carol. Carol, it's Leah Heston. I need to speak to Leo Crane. My voice was tight. Oh, hello, Miss Heston. I'm afraid he's in a session right now. Can I take a message? No, I need to talk to him. It's an emergency. There was a pause. I could hear a keyboard clacking in the background. Ma'am, he's with his art therapist. He's been making wonderful progress. We don't like to interrupt his sessions. He gets agitated. Progress? What kind of progress? He's writing, dear, all the time, filling up notebooks faster than we can supply them. It's been a real breakthrough. He's very focused. The words were meant to be reassuring. They felt like a cage closing around me. Just let me talk to him, for 1 minute. My voice was pleading now. I'm sorry, Miss Heston, but I can't do that, she said, her professional sympathy a wall of steel. He's had a very good week. We can't risk a setback. I'll be sure to tell him you called. The line clicked dead. I stood there in the quiet of my apartment, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. He's writing. Focused. The journal felt heavy in my hand, like a stone. I stared at the sentence. Your ending is wrong. It wasn't a critique, it was a correction. A declaration. My breath hitched. I slowly, deliberately, turned the page. It wasn't blank anymore. A new paragraph sat below the first. It wasn't in Leo's elegant cursive. The letters were tight, small, and sharp. A familiar, venomous precision. It was Kyle's style. A perfect imitation. The true terror is not the monster in the dark, the text read. It is the slow, creeping certainty that the faces you trust are masks. The smile of a friend becomes a predator's grin. A lover's touch feels like the probing of a spider. The world does not change, but your eyes are peeled open, and you see the rot that was always there. You are the only one who sees. You are alone. And the walls are listening. I stumbled back, dropping the journal. It hit the floor with a soft, final thud. My hand flew to my mouth. No, it's not possible. He's in a goddamn asylum. He can't. Leo. My mind raced, trying to find a logical path. A handhold. Maybe Leo was just mimicking him. A form of therapy. A way to process the trauma by copying the source. The package. Maybe a sympathetic nurse sent it, thinking it would help. It was all just a terrible, misguided attempt at healing. It had to be. My eyes were glued to the open journal on the floor. I watched it, waiting for it to move, to do something. It did nothing. It was just an object. Ink on paper. Shaking, I bent down and picked it up. My hands trembled so hard the pages fluttered. I flipped past the second page, to the third. It was blank. The fourth. Blank. The fifth. Blank. I riffled through the rest of the journal. Empty. A wave of dizzying relief washed over me. I had imagined it. A hallucination. Stress. Lack of sleep. My mind was playing tricks on me, projecting my fears onto the page. I took a deep, shuddering breath and held the journal up again, staring at the third, empty page. I needed to prove it to myself. I needed to see the clean, cream-colored paper and know that I was still sane. I watched, and a dot of black appeared in the center of the page. I didn't blink. I couldn't. The dot grew, a tiny bead of liquid darkness. It wasn't soaking through from the other side. It was blooming from within the fibers of the paper itself. It elongated, stretching into a thin line, then another, twisting and curving with an unnatural speed. A letter. A word. The ink bled into existence, forming a sentence as I watched in frozen horror. There once was a woman who screamed into a pillow so no one would hear. My own secret. A memory from the first week after I'd escaped Kyle, my throat raw from silent nocturnal terror. My scream was real this time. A sharp, strangled sound. I threw the journal away from me. It soared across the room, hitting the far wall and falling to the floor, splayed open. I scrambled backward, my back hitting the kitchen cabinets. My eyes were locked on the book. It wasn't done. Even from across the room, I could see it. The black ink was still flowing, spreading across the page like a living stain. The letters arranged themselves with a terrible, silent intelligence. It was writing a story. Right now. For me. She thought the story was over. She thought she had slain the dragon and rescued the prince. She wrote her own ending, a neat little bow on a box full of severed heads. She told the world, this is how it was. And the world believed her. I choked on a sob, pressing myself harder against the cabinets. My gaze darted to the door. I had to get out. I had to run. But I couldn't move. I was pinned by the sight of it. The unstoppable, unholy act of creation happening on my floor. But the prince was not grateful. The prince had been shown a new kind of magic. The dragon's fire was not extinguished. It had merely found a warmer cave. The prince found a chisel and began to carve. He was not carving wood. He was carving a new muse out of the woman's tragedy. He would tell a better story. A truer story. My gaze fell on my own manuscript, the neat stack of pages on my desk. The marionette. My truth. It looked pathetic. Powerless. A child's drawing next to a masterpiece of madness. The ink on the floor slowed. It formed one last, final line at the bottom of the page, a clear, bold credit. A signature. The curse hadn't just been passed on. It had been perfected. It had evolved. Kyle was the author. Leo was his legacy. And the last line of the new chapter, bleeding into the clean white page in my sterile, quiet apartment, was a name. By Leo Crane.